Hey, welcome to Dub Zone for this afternoon. We've got game one underway already, and it is a top of the table clash, or almost thereabouts. Melbourne City up against Sydney FC. It's Courtney Vine who's proved the difference thus far at Kingston Heath Soccer Complex, and we've got around 5 minutes left to play as Melbourne City look for an equaliser. Awesome to have your company this Saturday afternoon for our interactive coverage of the Liberty A-League season. I'm Neve Owens. We've got a couple of big games coming up and kicking off very soon. It's lovely to be here alongside once again Kat Haddad. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Always good to see you. And Teo Palazzeri. Hello, Teo.
Great to see you, Neve.
Nice to see you too, and to be back here alongside Canberra United legend Grace Gill. Hi, Gigi.
Great to be here.
Cannot wait to hear about your adventures this week. But first, can we start with the points situation for Canberra United? FA hearing their appeal as we speak. We don't know exactly when we'll hear the result of that. When you look at those 3 points and they play this afternoon, how crucial are they to Canberra United's finals hopes?
Yeah, well, I think the outcome of that appeal in conjunction with the game against Victory this afternoon, if they were to lose both of those cases, I think 6 points is a hill too far to climb for Canberra. But if they are to win their appeal and get a result against Victory this afternoon, they're still very much in contention for the top 4.
Yeah, that's a hard double whammy this close
exactly.
to finals to bounce back from. And Teo, it's not only Canberra United keeping a close eye on this side of things now. Brisbane Roar overnight docked 3 points. Different crime, same punishment. What's happened?
So if you accumulate 4 yellow cards in the A-League Women's, you are suspended for 1 game. Ish Norrie did exactly that with her 4th yellow card of the season away to the Wellington Phoenix. However, took the field and played against Western United last weekend. That 2-0 win for the Brisbane Roar has since been turned into a 3-0 forfeit loss. The option to appeal is there for 7 days. Brisbane haven't indicated whether they will as yet. It seems fairly open and shut, though. This is football all around the world. If you play suspended, your team loses the points. So Norrie actually picked up a 5th yellow card of the season in that game, no less. But the 4 is what should have activated the suspension, took the field anyway, and so the result's been overturned.
So that news for Brisbane Roar overnight. Gigi, for you as a player, I'm like a goldfish. I would have no idea how many yellows I was on at any given time. What were you like? Did you remember?
I would have remembered because I didn't pick up that many yellow cards, let
clean
alone
player, angel.
that kind of thing. So I think if you're the kind of player who really regularly getting carded, then you might actually lose track of it. But if you're a player who doesn't often get cards, then I think you're going to remember every single one you get.
Kat, I know you love your football, you play as well. How do you go? Are you quite an aggressive player on the field?
So you asked me this on the live and same response. I avoid confrontation and conflict. Football does bring out my aggressive side, I'll admit. I've had a card or 2 in my time, but you're not going to see me in a biff. But it sounds like Neve was the type of player who might.
Let's have a look at Match Week 18 fixtures and results, shall we? And then we're going to go back to Kingston Heath and watch the final moments of this game. But it started last night. Adelaide United, Newcastle Jets 2-2. And Teo, is that officially the end of Adelaide United's finals hopes?
It is. So they needed a borderline miracle. They are now mathematically eliminated. Canberra United against Melbourne Victory and Wellington against Perth Glory are our Dub Zone games today. And just take note that Western Sydney versus Brisbane Roar game tomorrow, that is now a 7 p.m. kickoff. It's been moved due to the warm weather.
Let's have a look at what that means for the ladder heading into the last couple of weeks of play. And as we await full time in Sydney FC's clash with Melbourne City, it is Western United who remain on top for now. That Sydney FC have 3 points coming their way very soon by the looks of things. Melbourne Victory holding on to their top 4. And you can see why those 3 points. And indeed, that clash with Melbourne Victory kicks off at 3 o'clock this Savo, Teo, is oh so crucial to Canberra United.
It certainly is. And we will get into the permutations of it throughout the course of the day, because Perth, they need to take care of business against Wellington, who themselves can jump off the foot of the table, potentially avoid the wooden spoon if they were to win against Perth today. Of course, they play Newcastle in Newcastle before the end of the season.
Let's head back to Kingston Heath now, because Sydney FC have the lead over Melbourne City. And early doors in this one, Teo, it was Courtney Vine running riot down that right edge.
Yeah, and look, they've shaded the chances as far as the opportunities to take a 2-0 lead since this moment. But Grace, it was one long ball from Sarah Hunter. Melbourne City pressing up the pitch. Julia Grosso out-sprinted by Courtney Vine. What a great finish at full speed.
It was a wonderful finish, and look, I think anyone out-sprinted by Courtney Vine, you can't be too hard on them. She's so rapid, but the finish itself was quality, and as a Matilda, she needs to be finding the back of the net, which is exactly as she did. It was a really well-worked goal.
There were some chaotic moments in this match as far as Sydney Sydney trying to score a second goal. Holly McNamara, now this was a real scare. That was a shin injury. Thankfully not the knee. As we know, she's come back from her second ACL. And she's been the main creator for Melbourne City, but just hasn't been able to unlock the likes of Kodo Rojas and Hannah Wilkinson. Rihanna Pollicina missing this game for personal reasons as well. So down one attacker. Naomi Chinema ended up in the back of the net there. The ball didn't. That was absolute chaos. Clearing it off your own post. How about that for improvising there from Chinema? Her first start back from injury. Princess Abini rounded the keeper here, put it into the side netting, and then Grace Sally James has at least kept Melbourne City in this game with a chance by making this big one-on-one save from Rachel Lowe.
This was a huge save. Sally James has had a couple of really key saves in this match so far, and I think as well remembering for Sydney FC that they've still got Madison Haley to come back into the side, and she's their leading goal scorer for the season so far. So the fact that they're sort of getting through without Haley and with the efforts of Courtney Vine and others, but knowing that she'll come back into the side is huge.
And we just saw that save there from Sally James as well. So Sydney FC, they are up now to 9 shots on target, 1.87 XG, to just 0.88 of Melbourne City. This is a replay of live action because Sarah Hunter is down being assessed for an injury. 3 shots on target for Melbourne City. They've had 56% possession, so not as ball dominant as usual, but after the frustration of losing the Melbourne Derby 2-0 on Monday, Grace, the same problems again. They've not been able to really lay siege to Jada Wyman or the Sydney goal, and ultimately Sydney FC have picked their moments better, and it's really been good goalkeeping from Sally James that has stopped this game getting out of hand, much like the meeting at Allianz Stadium where Sydney won 3-0.
Yeah, and I think for City, they haven't quite found that balance in having both Wilkinson, Rojas in the side, what works best for them in the way of formation, personnel up front. And it's been a little helter-skelter for them. They're still finding some results and some good football, but we're not seeing that really dominant possession-style football that we so often do from City teams.
And Kat, we will stick with this game through to the end of stoppage time, but certainly there's been plenty of attention on the match so far from fans that have been watching through the afternoon before Dub Zone got on the air. I mean, what's the sentiment been out there about how Sydney FC, even though it's only 1-0, have largely dominated the game?
A lot of commentary around how they've dominated the game and had so many opportunities to score. I think for those Sydney FC fans that are watching, the likes of comments from Ladies League, Michelle Morris, commenting on how there's been so many opportunities, but very few have converted, which I think can be quite frustrating to watch when you do look at that scoreline and think that you could be a few more goals up than you are at this present moment.
Is there a level of confidence, though, Gigi, heading into finals that Sydney, who lost so unexpectedly last weekend, have bounced back with a win against one of the top sides?
Well, I think given Sydney's history and not only the kind of players they've got, the management they've got, they're so experienced in this end of the season, the pointy end of the season, whether it's finals football, whether it's making a claim for the top spot. And they're a team that have been here time and time again. They're not unfamiliar with this territory. So they probably thrive under pressure, and in these moments, and even not at their best, they're still a really dominant team.
And they beat top of the table sides, Teo, right?
They
That's
do.
their bread and butter.
They do. They rise to the occasion. Last week we said they played down to their opponent. This week they have played up to the occasion. You know what? You'd probably rather have it that way because you don't play finals against bottom 4 teams, do you? You play them against the fellow top 4. Melbourne City are now really starting to try to apply some pressure. Oh, it was sliced onto the roof of the net, nearly in for an own goal. And Sydney FC, even though Nat Tobin is back today, Kirsty Fenton out with a minor ankle injury, which we think is just a 1 week for her. But it does mean that Anna Green has played the full game. Again, the New Zealand former international defender who has been sparingly used this season. As we see there, that could have been a disaster had that fallen just a little bit lower. Jada Wyman watching it fall on the roof of the net. And so you see the wind has picked up. Chelsea Blissett is going to swing in this corner kick. City trying to find an equaliser. They've got it! And it's Caitlin Torpey, I think a day after her birthday, who has got a belated but perfect present here. And it's 1-1 for Melbourne City, a stoppage time equaliser. And that could be a vital goal in the battle for the Premier's Plate, that trophy that sits right there between us.
Well, right on cue, Teo, and what an incredible finish as well. Caitlin Torpey, she's such an underrated player in this Melbourne City side. The amount of work she does in the midfield, but to get herself on the end of that, completely unmarked, she's ghosted in at the back post there. That's a really tidy finish for Caitlin Torpey, and what a way to equalise so late in the game for Melbourne City.
Turned 23 yesterday, Caitlin Torpey. It's her 6th A-League women's goal, 2nd of the season in appearance number 75. That's Katie Bowen, that's not Caitlin Torpey. But I tell you what, a huge moment because Sydney FC had all those chances for 2-0 And now there's barely 60 seconds left, and maybe a bit of generosity from the referee. But it looks as though Melbourne City are going to grab a vital share of the points here.
Well, what an equaliser, and what a result as well. And that's how many times do we see this happening when the team dominates possession or dominates the control of the game, just can't capitalise on their chances. That's been Sydney today, and Melbourne City.
They're on here. Blissett is going to try and go end-to-end. This would be a smash and grab with 2 goals after the 93rd minute. Hannah Wilkinson into the area here. Melbourne City trying for the big remontada, and it's held onto by Jada Wyman, and that is a vital save.
Oh my gosh, I forgot to breathe for a second.
Not a Sydney FC fan at all sitting there.
No, just a football fan.
Yeah, okay.
And so stoppage time is up, and Wilkinson still full of running in the legs in the 96th minute of the game, and going
Great
across
save.
the keeper.
What a save.
That's a brilliant
that
save.
moment.
And she had to hold on to that as well, because Melbourne City had numbers streaming into the box. Really, really good hands there by Jada Wyman.
What's the mentality of a team when they can kick it into gear in stoppage time, or they're pretty much past stoppage time? This is stoppage time. What does it take to kind of go into gear like that and just try for another goal?
I think it's just, at that point in time, desperation.
Yeah.
Desperation stakes, anything. Just throw numbers into the box, throw a ball into the box, the corner, the set piece, a really good opportunity to get some shirts into the 18-yard box.
It was Caitlin Torp who also scored in the corresponding fixture last year. Sydney had been undefeated all season until they went to Amy Park. And actually, as we see this save here from Mackenzie Hawkesby to Sally James. But she scored in the home game against Sydney FC 2 years in a row. So it's an opponent she likes playing against, Caitlin Torpey. And now Holly McNamara is trying to cause trouble. And that's an important tackle from Deborah Ann Delaharp to take the ball and stop Melbourne City advancing. We've gone 90 seconds now beyond the allocated 5 minutes. The referee being very generous here. Chelsea Blissett with the header on. Nat Tobin with a defensive header away. And Grace, this tackle from Delaharp, absolutely vital because the Mac was nearly away. But Melbourne City continue to apply the pressure. Here she is again. Holly McNamara trying to keep the ball glued to her feet. And it's all hands on the pump for Sydney FC. Here's another cross to the edge of the box. Wilkinson's headed down. How much longer will the referee let this play? Hawkesby, maybe one last chance for Sydney then. In the 98th minute, it's Courtney Vine. And that is very good goalkeeping from Sally James to get out of her line. And that's the full-time whistle.
Wow.
We don't want this to end. Keep playing until there's a goal. And look at that. That sums it up. Finals-like intensity at full-time of this 1-1 draw.
And you can see as well that the Sydney FC players look dejected. They've let that full 3 points go in the dying minutes of this game. But what an ending. What a finish. The tension here in this opening minutes of Dub Zone on the couch. We didn't want that to end.
I can't believe it. I had 3 points for Sydney FC at the 90-minute mark. 100% in that game, Teo. They had double the shots on goal. It felt like they'd had so much possession. Courtney Vine was running her own race down the right edge. I don't understand how they've shared the points in that one. What's just happened?
Oh, it's really a great set piece from Chelsea Blissett. And we saw how strong the wind was. For those not familiar with the ground, it's in the southern suburbs. Generally not a windy venue, but it comes off a golf course, over the back of the golf course, across the ground, clearly there. And you saw the corner flag as Blissett swung that corner in. And the Sydney FC defence, I mean, dare I drop a stat? Kirsty Fenton is the best aerial duel winner in the league, not in the team today. And there you go. They've conceded at a corner for the second game in a row because, of course, that's how Wellington Phoenix scored their match-winning goal last weekend.
And not to take anything away from that finish as well, because Caitlin Torpey, really good run late into the box and at the far post, and that was a tidy finish.
Kat, talk us through what's happening in the socials world, because I know during that game, Sydney FC fans were getting uber excited about the kind of football they were playing, about the scoreline, but there's plenty of other things that have been happening on socials this week as well.
My gosh, yeah. Like I said, my heart was beating really fast in those last minutes in that game. I can't believe they equalised at the last minute. But like you said, a lot happening in the social world. We'll kick it off with one that I'm sure hits home for you. It's Ellie Brush announcing her retirement. She's a Canberra United legend, one of the founding players of that club, played for the Matildas as well. It's a huge deal for her to retire, essentially, and the social world lit up. What are your thoughts on her career?
Oh, well, such a special moment for Ellie Brush, and I'm really proud of her. You can see with her son, little Leo there, which is really lovely. But she had the 2 ACL injuries and has come back to do this on her own terms, which I think is so special. She was a foundation player member in 2008 for Canberra United, captain of the team, and just such a legend of a person, not just a player, but what she brings in the way of her personality and her leadership to Canberra United and Sydney FC as well has been exceptional.
Game number 143 today, and if not for those injuries, if not for the time spent playing AFLW, where she played for the GWS Giants, so dual code athlete, could have easily, been well above Teresa Polias's record at sort of the 160, 170 game mark, and that's in an era of playing 12 games a season.
Yeah, exactly. And she's just one of those stalwarts in this competition. And look, it's a real shame to lose her, but you can also understand and really, really respect her decision, which I do. I absolutely do. And, I'm really happy to call Ellie Brusher a good friend of mine as well, but I'm really happy for her to be able to do this at McKellar Park, which is where it all started for Canberra United, in front of her family and friends and her dad as well, whose health is really poor at the moment. And she spoke about that throughout the week. And I think that's a really important thing for her to be able to acknowledge back in Canberra.
What will it be like at McKellar Park this afternoon? It's a big game for Canberra United in terms of their finals hopes, but it's also Ellie Brusher's last game at home and at a place that has been such a huge part of her life for so many years.
Yeah, look, I think it will be really emotional, and there was this real push around Canberra to pack McKellar for Ellie particularly, and the result aside, the situation aside, with needing a win against Melbourne Victory, I think the girls are going to lift for her alone, and I think that's really important.
Hugely special afternoon at McKellar Park. Ellie Brusher's last home game, Kat. There's been quite a bit happening across socials overnight as well as across the course of the week.
You mentioned ACL injuries, and it's also hit the news this morning that Lena Oberdorf, who plays for Wolfsburg, she's also a German national team player, one of the best players in the world, up there with Beth Mead, Sam Kerr, Alexia Putellas, has a suspected ACL injury. We don't know a whole lot just yet. Not a lot has been confirmed, but this is really big news heading into the Women's World Cup. There's commentary online saying if she doesn't play, cancel women's football, which is obviously very dramatic, but I think it goes to show the impact that this woman has on the game. So yet another injury to hit the books, which is so unfortunate.
And devastating as well. She's such a class player, and when you saw the footage of her doing that, it was one of those non-contact, innocuous, the opposition player sent her one way and the knee had sort of caved in. So it was one of those ones that you just dread to think is the case, but it looks like...
You see once, and once is enough, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly right. And look, we've seen so many of the world's best players in the women's game go down with ACL injuries, and particularly in lead up to this Women's World Cup. So it's that time of year where you just hold your breath and you hope for the best possible outcome. But yeah, look, that's devastating if that is confirmed to be the result.
Absolutely. And when we know more, we'll tell you more. But in other news, this is news that hit the A-Leagues this week, was the fact that we're expanding and that we're looking at 2 new clubs for now and potentially more in the future, but with Canberra and Auckland being the kind of key players in this expansion as well, which once again, Grace being a Canberra United player legend. I'd love to get your thoughts on the fact that Canberra and Auckland are both considered for this expansion, and there's a lot of discussion around it, what it's going to look like. We know that Canberra United play a really important role in the women's game, but now looking at a Canberra men's team and what that could look like based on the current landscape.
Yeah, well, this isn't the first time that Canberra has really thrown every bit of energy at trying to get an A-League men's team into the competition. And look, from a perspective as a former Canberra United player, I'd love to see a Canberra men's team in the mix. We've got such wonderful fans in Canberra, and particularly around Canberra United. The fans from day one, they're still there today. So 15 years on, those Canberra United women's fans are still there today. I think if we see a men's team expand into the competition, that's only going to grow, and that's only going to expand the women's support and the women's network as well. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see that the Canberra United is almost that women's legacy that is now carried on into the men's game. But we did throw a poll out to the Liberty A-League's Twitter asking you guys if you think that the Canberra men's team should adopt the Canberra United name and colours that we associate with the women's team. And 85% of you have said yes. So they want to see the green running out on that men's pitch as well as the women's. But I think it's something we'll talk about across the panel and across the show today, because Teo feels a little differently about that.
Yeah, you're a contrarian in this argument. You're part of the no camp there. We are winning the battle at this point. So let us know your no vote. What's it based on?
Well, I think let's get into the games that have just kicked off.
Delaying
let
the
me,
argument?
Yeah, I am. Let me
Okay.
formulate all my ducks in
Okay.
a row, and then I'll come back to you.
All right, fair enough, because we do have football underway. We'll have a look at the team sheets as well in just a moment. But the beauty of Dove Zone is it will bring you both games simultaneously this afternoon, with Teo and Grace calling all of the big moments between Canberra United and Melbourne Victory, and Wellington Phoenix and Perth Glory. Teo, that Canberra United Melbourne Victory game in particular, hugely important in terms of the top four, and Perth with plenty on the line as well.
Yeah, not least because Melbourne Victory now, with that late equaliser for Melbourne City, means that they're still in the mix for third, never mind looking over their shoulder at Canberra United, trying to close the gap from underneath them. Appeal or not, if Victory win today, Canberra's not going to be able to catch them. So Melbourne Victory are in an enviable position coming off their win in the derby on Monday. The hero of that derby, though, Paige Zoyce, out of the team. Yet to hear back from the club as well about why she's out. So we can only interpret it as coach's decision for now. That's the only change for Victory. Jess Nash is a great replacement at right back, comes back from international duty. Canberra have got Chloe Lincoln and also Sasha Grove back from international duty. No Emma Ilioski today, so Holly Murray comes into the starting 11. Ellie Brush comes in for Kennedy Faulkner. Cheng Shui Wu drops to the bench. So 4 changes to the starting 11, Grace, after a disappointing 1-1 draw against Western Sydney Wanderers last Sunday, where Canberra basically gave the initiative back to Melbourne Victory in this top 4 race.
Yeah, and this is something we've seen a little bit from Canberra across the course of the season, where they've had the initiative and handed it over opposition teams. They're creating a wealth of chances, and they're really creative. In the final third, Vesna Milivojevic has been excellent for Canberra this season. Question mark perhaps on Emma Ilioski today, not in the matchday squad. Sort of curious as to if she's okay. But of course, having Chloe Lincoln back in the squad from her time overseas in Kyrgyzstan with the under-20s Matildas, playing well and keeping a couple of clean sheets for the youth national team too. So she should be coming back brimming with confidence. But as I mentioned, I think the Canberra girls are really going to step up today for Ellie Brush, if nothing else. And the result, if they should get it, will be a byproduct of trying to push really hard for Ellie's final home game.
So that is taking place at McKellar Park this afternoon. Let's look at the teams that are lining up, with Wellington up against Perth Glory. Teo, step us through the team changes and the big ins and outs for this one.
So Wellington, an unchanged team, just the one switch on the bench. Claudia Chico in for Zoe McMeekin. Chico coming back from Young Matilda's duty as well. Perth have made 2 changes. They've swapped their goalkeeper again. Sarah Langman comes in for Morgan Aquino, who was credited with an own goal in the 2-1 loss to Adelaide last week. Ella Mastrantonio comes in for Sarah Kane. So this is last chance saloon here for Perth Glory, Grace. They need to win today. Otherwise, we start getting into beautiful mind mathematics in order to find a way into the top 4 for them. So basically, no excuses. Wellington, though, they've got a lot at stake as well. They do not want to win the wooden spoon 2 years in a row. They want to go into that game against Newcastle knowing a draw is good enough to keep 10th and leave Newcastle 11th. Of course, if this game ends in a draw or if they lose, then Newcastle will have the upper hand, knowing that a draw is good enough for them to stay above Wellington.
Something we saw from Wellington last season was how much better they got towards the end of the season. And look, I think the longer season this year has actually worked in Wellington's favour, because over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some really good football. We've seen some girls settle into what is A-League women's football and start playing the way that I think we know they can. One of those in particular for me has been Bree Edwards in goal. She's taken the opportunity. Lily Alfeld, the captain, has been injured all year, and Bree's just had to step up, and not only in the way that she's playing, but her leadership, her speaking to the media. I think she's really stepped into the role so nicely for the team. And sometimes, unfortunately for one player is another player's fortune. And it's really pleasing to see for Wellington how well they've taken to that.
It has really felt like over the last couple of weeks, Teo mentioned the wooden spoon there, that they are working their way off the bottom of the ladder. They're playing better football, they feel more confident, and it feels like they're growing. And when you hear them speak, it feels like they understand that they're on the right trajectory as well.
It definitely feels like that about it, and they're playing with a level of confidence that we didn't see from them earlier in the season. And I think maybe the expectation from Wellington this year was that they would start a lot better than they did, given how well they finished last season. But what we've seen from them is growth and progress, and Nat Lawrence has done a pretty solid job in building this team, which is a young team, which is an inexperienced team, to now contending with some of the best teams in the competition. So that's wonderful to see.
I just wanted to talk about the finals race, but also the Premier's Plate race. because as a result of that late equaliser, Sydney FC, if they were to lose the appeal and have to give the 3 points back to Canberra United, they could only get to 40 points, while Western United can still get to 42. However, if Sydney FC keep the 3-0 forfeit from Canberra, they can get to 43. Western United can only get to 42. In the battle for third place, Melbourne City can get to 35 points now with their remaining games away to Perth and home to Canberra. Melbourne Victory, if they win today, and their remaining games home to Brisbane and away to Wellington, can also get to 35 points. So it is super duper close. Goal difference is crucial. Every really kick of the ball matters at this point of the season, and it's exciting that we've got it all unfolding on Dubzone.
Do you know what I'm excited about? That you explain that to me each and every week. I have trouble getting my head around the numbers in a table. You tell me what they could be. As players going into these final rounds of the season, how aware are you guys of those permutations? Do you look ahead? Do you know what the potential is here?
Yeah, look, I think when you ask most players, in media, they'll say, we're focusing on this game, we're concentrating one game at a time. Of course you know, of course you know. And if it's not through a directive of the coach or the management staff talking through what our options are, it's certainly something that you're aware of. And these players are smart, they're tuned into what's happening around the league, they know who's scoring, they know who's winning. And of course they understand what permutations will be around results across the league, so they know.
Well, we've got this Premier's plate.
We do.
She's a beauty.
Isn't
She's
she?
absolutely beautiful. Probably the closest I'll ever get, and that's fine.
But hang on, you've won it, Grace. You can touch it.
I can touch it. I'm
yeah.
allowed.
When I arrived on set and saw it, I said, "Is this a trophy that we can touch?" And I'm not
said
going
yes.
to. If I
can.
was dodgy, I would have had a little touch. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to put any bad luck on any of these teams. But
I'm not exactly sure that's how it works.
Really?
I mean, do you think if you touch it,
Yeah.
Sydney FC as your team are therefore going to
I'm
get bad
very
luck?
superstitious.
Okay, don't
I
touch it
don't
then.
think that you should. It's not my. I can't win it, so I shouldn't touch it.
Yeah, you could get signed next year. The league's
is true.
expanding.
Still time.
This is
Mariners.
true. Check out my highlight reel on YouTube. I don't have one. I should have one,
You
though.
should,
I
you
should.
should.
But we've asked a few different players when they've come called into the show whether or not, their place on the table really impacts their performance. And some say, no, I don't pay attention to it. Your comments are really interesting because if I was in the Liberty A leagues, I'd have a lot of trouble not paying attention to the fact that we're chasing 3 points, or especially with all of this point discrepancy now. Surely that's playing on the minds of these girls as they head into such a crucial period of the game.
No, completely. And I think what a lot of players will say, and which is very true, is that there's only so much as players that you can control, and that's your own performance, what you do out on the pitch. And it is a cliche, but it is so true, because when it comes to some of those technicalities around, breaches that are outside the players' control, all they can now do is show up on game day throughout the week at training and perform and get the results. And that's the very best that they can manage. Canberra is in that situation. They've got to go out today against Melbourne Victory and win. What happens with the appeal around their sanctions, completely out of their control. So what is in control is what happens on the field for the next 90 minutes.
And at the moment, it is 0-0 Canberra United up against Melbourne Victory. But our early kickoff today saw Melbourne City draw 1-1 with Sydney FC in an incredibly exciting end to the game. Naomi Chinema from Melbourne City has been good enough to join us now. Naomi, the stoppage time play was crazy. What was it like for you guys out there?
It was crazy, especially with the conditions. It was very hot out here, but we couldn't focus on that. So I'm pretty sure the girls just gave it their all in the end, and that got us the result. I'm really proud of them.
From here on the couch, it felt like Sydney FC had the better running of the 90 minutes. Can you tell us about the mindset within your side that said, you know what, they haven't put away their opportunities, we can still get something out of this contest?
Well, honestly, I think from the beginning, I really liked how we played as a team. Like, we were able to thread balls through them, and I think we connected our passes really well. And we were very consistent with how we wanted to play. And I think in the end, staying with that consistency allowed us to win the game. I mean, to draw the game, sorry. But it definitely went, we had a big fight. Sydney, they gave us our challenges, but we dealt with them well.
Well, perhaps felt like a win for you, Naomi, and deservedly so as well. But it's really wonderful to see you back out on the field. Tell us about that goal line clearance, the header into your own post and then out again, because we on the couch here were going up in arms. That was spectacular.
Oh, thanks. I was just like, where's the ball? Where's the ball? Find the ball, and I got the ball. So, yeah, I was just happy. it was just instincts, I suppose. Like, you don't really have much time to think in that situation. Everything was moving really fast.
Naomi, unlike the chat with Holly a couple of weeks ago, I know you were subbed off in the 72nd minute this week. But how's the body? How's the injury? You came off the bench last week and looked great in the derby in the minutes you did get. What's the plan? How far away is the full 90 and how are you feeling?
Well, I would say today was definitely a big test. Like, coming from 11 minutes last week to 70, I think that that was really challenging, and also it was quite hot today. So I think those two factors, I just couldn't think about those. I just had to play my game, and I think that helped. But yeah, I'm feeling really good, especially coming off that. Obviously, a few things to work on still, but I think that it worked out in the end.
Yeah, you're only 18. You turn 19 next month. Today was appearance number 25. So you've been getting games in as a teenager. You're building your experience. And from hearing a podcast interview you did with Pakua Frimpong a couple of weeks ago, it is obvious that you are a young leader and you are very composed and you've got a voice out there on the pitch already. Do you think the team has missed your voice while you were out injured? And was it nice just to be back in there today, being able to contribute to what the team can do?
I will say I'd miss being around the team, but they've definitely held up their end on the field with or without me. It's just they all work really well together, and I think coming back onto the field into that really just helped us be more united. But I'm grateful for the time I got back onto the field, and yeah, I'm happy.
Naomi, it's great to see you back on that pitch. We've got the Premier's Plate with us on the show today, so I get to stare at the beautiful gold trophy. But what's the mentality of your team heading into like such a crucial part of the season? We're at the nitty-gritty end. You guys clearly showed that you're serious players in that stoppage time today, but what's the talk like amongst the team?
I think, with the fight that we gave today, we definitely know what's on the line. The next two games, we know we have to win them, and I think we'll go in with that mentality. We know that we still will stick to our values and stay true to ourselves, and I think that will help us through the next two games and, yeah, potentially for finals.
And I've got one more about you, Naomi, because you've already been to one Under-20 World Cup. You're still eligible to go to the next one. How is your development tracking? Is the ambition to move overseas at some point? Is it just to keep playing in the A-Leagues until the opportunity comes up at a later date? Because as a centre-back, it's a position that Australia has always struggled for and has always needed. It's great to see young defenders coming through and getting starts and first-team minutes at a young age. Where do you see yourself going over the next couple of years?
Well, right now I'm just focusing in the moment. I can't tell you too much yet because I'm not sure 100% myself. But I think what's really important for me is to focus on improving each game and my development. And right now I have a really good environment to do that. And the team's helped me with that too.
Naomi, it is awesome to see you back out there on the pitch. Well done on getting a point out of that one today, and best of luck in the lead up to the finals.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Naomi Chinema joining us after Melbourne City and Sydney FC drew 1-1 in what was a crazy stoppage time comeback for Melbourne City. Let's head across the ditch now. Wellington up against Perth, and Teo, it's the visitors who managed to bag the first goal of this game.
Yes, as we go back and have a look at the goal, it's vital for Perth because coming into today, best case scenario, they could only get to 31 points. To put that in context, City are now on 29. Melbourne Victory are on 26. So they've got quite a gap to make up. Even if they take care of business in their games, they're going to need favours further up the table. Sierra Hinson, that's a good place to start. Really good finish. Hannah Lowry, the latest nominee for the Young Player of the Season, the Liberty Young Player of the Year, gets the assist. Grace Gill, this is nice football from Perth, and they've cut through the Phoenix defence there.
Well, the word there, Teo, is cut through. That pass from Ella Mastrantonio to find Hannah Lowry was exceptional, and that one-touch play to Sierra Hinson, who has been wonderful for Perth this season. That's really lovely football to see, and look, if they continue to play this way for the remainder of this game, they'll have a really dominant afternoon.
That's 5 for the season for Sierra Hinson, 10 in 24. So not as prolific as Perth would have hoped, but she is, still scoring consistently. It's more that just that their down days have been quite down, Perth. I mean, they'd be so frustrated that they didn't get a draw, that they didn't beat Adelaide last week. They created enough chances to win the game. I think they had well over 2.5 XG. in a game where they've only scored the one goal and ultimately missed out on a share of the points because of a point-blank save right at the end of the game. So they've left points on the table this season, the Glory, and even though they've beaten Western United in Ballarat, they've had some good results against high teams on the table. They need to take care of business today and just keep themselves alive.
They do, and we've got to remember as well that unfortunately for Perth and for Riley Baisden, she fell to an ACL rupture earlier in the season as well and was their leading goal scorer. Like, excellent player. So that's where someone like Sierra Hinson becomes all the more important for Perth Glory to step in and to step up in those moments. Hannah Lowry too, a wonderful technical young player, has to be really important in those moments. But as we saw with that combination play, Mestre Antonio to Lowry to Hinson, really wonderful build-up.
We've got a new team joining the A-League Women's next season, Kat, and a request on Twitter to see some highlights from who? Who are they looking for?
I think they want to see a bit of me. And that's okay.
And who can blame them?
I can arrange that. But you have to go find that comment, and if we can get about 100 likes on it, then maybe I'll put
100 likes
together.
on the "Can we expect to see a cat and a dad" hype reel? Let's
How
have
much
that
playing
happen.
vision have you got? Is there a possibility that this could happen?
I play in a league that is not televised nor filmed.
Yeah,
It would be
your mum
my
and dad
friend
on the
question
sideline?
remains.
The question remains.
It's usually a Snapchat memory or something. But you know what? A video is a video. I'll see what I can pull together for you guys. Because I'm not going to lie, I've scored a couple of bangers in my time. And I feel like I've never really shared them with the world.
We could just recreate them.
Oh, yeah, we should do that.
Not to get too big picture about a topic you're having fun with here, but off the back of the Women's World Cup, players of all abilities at every level, particularly, adult women in their 30s, maybe even in their 40s, are going to think, hang on, can I play? Do I want to play? The opportunity's out there to play. There are so many entry points for the game and sort of standards of football that can accommodate you, even if you're a total beginner. And a show like Dub Zone, going to an A-League women's game for the first time or just watching the World Cup is your first contact with the sport. It is actually a great entry-level sport to get. Sorry, I'm not patronising you here. Like, I know you're trying for the A-Leagues, but
Taylor's calling me entry level.
I think he also called you a 40-year-old as well, maybe in that.
But what I'm saying
a
is,
40-year-old entry level player.
what I'm saying is,
And doing very well.
get onto my
Sorry,
football
Taylor.
and actually there are, it's not just about the elite and the pinnacle of the game. It's a participation sport that is doing great things. And the idea of hosting a World Cup and the legacy it will leave is that people of all abilities are going to get the opportunity to get out and, play, coach, volunteer, referee, etc.
Super fun.
It is
exactly
And
right.
To be fair, I had a very competitive game of walking football last week, and that is a tough game. It takes away the things we know about football in terms of the weight of a pass and the fact that you can't run. So I completely agree with your point, Tayo. It is entirely accessible, no matter what age, no matter what your ability is, that you can start playing the game.
We played a charity game of five-a-side. Was it five-a-side?
was
A little while
five-a-side,
back.
yeah.
Completely exhausting.
Oh,
I
yeah.
went into it thinking, I'm pretty fit. I've got this. I'm just going to run up and down the wing and look like I'm working really hard. I was absolutely shattered.
I could not walk for days after that, Nevo.
Gigi scored about 5 bangers in the
Wow.
opening 5 minutes of the first game. It was incredible. Anyway.
Oh, great chance for Hannah Lowry here. And that
Of that.
perhaps should have been 2-0 for Perth Glory. So they are playing well over in New Zealand. Just the second edition of the Distance Derby. Perth won 2-0 at Macedonia Park earlier in the season. And at the moment, they are really controlling the game. 26 final third entries to 13. So the territory, double the amount Perth Glory's way. And you can see there, 6 shots to 3 as well.
Don't forget that hashtag DubZone throughout the afternoon. Keep those tweets coming in. We love to hear where you're watching your football this afternoon and what you're making of the contest. Let's head back to McKellar Park in Canberra now. Canberra United up against Melbourne Victory. It's Ellie Brush's last game at home and a huge amount on the line for both sides. Victory, though, coming into this one, Gigi, on a real high, having won the derby and played some good football in doing so.
They looked really impressive, and this is always going to be a big challenge for Canberra. Melbourne Victory. One thing that Canberra obviously has in their favour is being at McKellar Park. That's a really difficult place for teams to play. But Victory, even without Alex Chidiac, they've got Melina Ayres, who's come back into good form. Beattie Goad, who in my mind has just gone from strength to strength across the season. I think she's been spectacular. And Tayo, you mentioned it, Paige Zoy, she's not in today, which is interesting to me, whether or not she's picked up a little injury throughout the week, because obviously the goal aside, I think she's a really impressive young player.
Yeah, no, haven't heard from Victory. So I think until further notice, coach's decision, it could be the short turnaround. They did play on Monday and obviously Jessica Nash comes into her preferred position in the team.
Let's head to a special guest at McKellar Park now. Heather Reid has been a pivotal part of football in Canberra for many years. She's the former CEO of Capital Football. She was awarded an Order of Australia medal for her services to football, and she's been inducted into the Football Australia Hall of Fame. Heather's been good enough to join us on Dub Zone the Savo. Heather, lovely to see you. Talk us through this announcement this week. How did you feel about hearing that after women's football being the stronghold in Canberra for so many years, a men's team will be joining the A-Leagues next season?
Look, I think it's very exciting, and first of all, thank you for inviting me on. This is a little bit different for me. I've made a quick surprise visit down to Canberra to be part of this last home game, and also, more importantly, Ellie Brush's farewell game after announcing her retirement. It's a big thing for Ellie. But going back to the A-League situation, I think many people have been fighting for a long time to get in the men's competition ever since the demise of the Canberra Cosmos.
Heather, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to interrupt you there because the line is really scratchy and we're having trouble hearing you. So I'm just going to pull you up and we'll try and fix up that line and come back to you in just a moment's time. We'll get back to Heather Reid. She is there at McKellar Park. Hopefully, Gigi, that dodgy mobile phone reception suggests that there is a huge crowd there to see Ellie Brush play a final game.
But also maybe in a black spot in the Canberra United change room that I spotted as well. So that could be it. But perhaps a really big crowd as well, which would be lovely.
That's, you know those dressing sheds.
I do know
what
them
McKellar
well.
Park dressing sheds look like. Heather mentioned there being in Canberra for Ellie Brush's final game, and I feel like so many members of the Canberra football community will have done the same thing. They'll be there to be a part of it today.
I really genuinely think they will, and that kind of epitomises what Canberra and the community at Canberra United is about. There will be fans who from day one got behind the team and will show up today for exactly that reason, to farewell Ellie Brush. And look, I know there's a lot of football to be played in this game yet, but I'm expecting at the end of the game it to be quite an emotional scene, irrespective of the result, just to farewell Ellie. And look, she deserves nothing less.
Hopefully she can continue right into finals, and you never know if Canberra United can get a win today. We've got an interesting tweet there as well, Kat.
So we touched on the poll that Liberty A-Leagues had posted today around whether or not this men's Canberra team should adopt the same branding, the kit, the colours of the Canberra United women's team. And there's a strong vote towards yes. However, the man next to me, Teo Pellizzeri, has thrown around an opinion that challenges that. And I'd love for you to explore that a little bit further. Let us know your thoughts. And also, Kate Doak, this comment here, she'd love to know why you think that the men shouldn't run out in lime green.
So it's multifaceted in the sense that the APL expansion, it's not a men's expansion. It is an expansion of men's, women's, potentially youth in the future, potentially NPL affiliates, but particularly A-League men's, A-League women's. And that means that Canberra United, which is currently run by the last state federation runner team, Capital Football, are going to have a handover process, the same as Football Victoria gave Melbourne Victory back to Melbourne Victory, the same with Football South Australia with Adelaide United, so on. Even Central Coast Football, ultimately, they didn't give their licence back to the Mariners. They just handed it in. And the Mariners did not take over the Central Coast women's team until next season. And that's why they've been in recess for such a long time, because the Mariners A-League men's franchise never actually ran the Mariners team. Anyway, with that context, I feel as though the men's element of this APL expansion should not be beholden to the 15 years of history and the 15 years of legacy that Canberra United have built. If you were the investors buying an A-League licence, as we see Canberra trying to defend grimly here against the Melbourne Victory to interrupt my flow, but why should the investors that are buying this new licence be beholden to have to inherit Canberra United's name and colours? If you are going to spend tens of millions of dollars on buying into this competition, shouldn't you be able to determine the name of your own franchise? That would be the question that I would throw out there. There are other elements to it and other arguments around perhaps why Canberra United's women's team should perhaps remain the exclusive holders of the green colours and the Canberra United name. But my personal opinion is that if you're going to spend 20 million plus on an A-League men's license, you should be able to name your own team, and you shouldn't have to inherit the name of the team, given that, the price tag is one that should allow you to determine your own fate.
Well, let's flip this for a minute, Teo, because how many teams have we seen across history? The men's team exists and the women's team comes in as part of the franchise. Why can't Canberra United be the trailblazers, which they are, an incredible community team in Canberra? And yes, as you say, Capital Football would sort of disconnect from the management of that, and it would be run by ownership that would look after the men's and the women's team, as does happen over many parts of the world. Canberra United already have an excellent brand in a community that is sports mad in Canberra. And I think from where the women's team's point of view standpoint is why not use that to leverage even further the women's brand? Use that to leverage the green kits, the McKellar home park, the stadiums we get, the fans we get. The women's fans are not going anywhere. They're staying with the women's teams. So it's not a case of the men's team's going to come in, they're going to get their own fans and take away from the women's fans. If anything, it's going to grow that fan base.
And if I was a fan of football in Canberra and I was thinking about investing the $20 million that I clearly have in the bank right now, I would hope that I'd be doing that not just from a financial or a monetary perspective, but because I felt a love and a connection and a passion for football in Canberra. And if that's so, well, then that's built on the Canberra United brand. That's it. You're not going to make money out of it, right? This is not going to be a money-making venture. You're doing it surely because of some connection to Canberra United football.
But to jump in off that, if you are thinking of it in a monetary sense, would you not use that existing platform franchise brand, which is so successful in Canberra, and leverage that into the men's program as well?
Well, I think, though, the decision for Canberra United, the decision for the green colours was one made in 2007 or 2000. The league started in 2008. Maybe the decision was made earlier than that with the name. Why wouldn't your consortium want to use more modern market research techniques? Canberra's a booming city. It's rapidly...
Lovely place, beautiful place to live.
Really great. No, what I'm saying is the population and the urban sprawl in Canberra is considerably different to what it was in 2008. Of
course.
And things like COVID and, job opportunities have forced a lot more people to go to Canberra that may previously have never considered it. I think it's why it's a shrewd decision to expand the A-League men's in there, because I think it's only going to keep growing. But why wouldn't you at least undertake the market research rather than saying we're locked into one name and one set of colours, and if we find a better option, if we find a better name or a better colour scheme or something that's going to resonate differently with the community, yes, Canberra United has built its own community in this space and they have cultivated incredibly well. They have the best fan base in the league. No one's arguing that. They have the biggest fan base in the league. But what I'm saying is, why would you landlock yourself in? And I have a solution to this, but if Heather's back, we can get Heather's opinion on it too.
She sure is. Why don't we go back to an expert on this one? Heather Reid, the former CEO of Capital Football, has been good enough to join us on Dove Zone. Heather, thank you for hanging in there and joining us once again. We were talking off the top about how you felt this week about the announcement that a men A-Leagues team would be joining Canberra.
Yeah, look, I think it's very exciting news, and obviously there's been a lot of people wanting a team from Canberra in the A-League men's competition for some time. So obviously there's a lot of nuts and bolts to be sorted out, particularly over this nice big shiny bauble. But I think if they can sort out a number of things like playing venue, training venue, and of course the funding, that's going to be very important.
We've just been having a discussion here on the couch about playing colours and name for the new side. Where do you stand? Do you think the Canberra United tradition should continue, or are you happy to see a new brand enter Canberra football?
Look, that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned there. Canberra United is a very strong brand in the community. It's got integrity. It's got a lot of credibility. The success of the club, the team, the players, the support people over the last, 15 years or so is phenomenal. There is no need to change the name, no need to change the colours. It's just got to be an extension of the current Canberra United team to include that extra team.
Heather, lovely to talk to you, and thanks very much for joining us. Can you chat to us a little bit about what you would see as some of the challenges of a men's team coming into Canberra?
Look, I think there's a number of them, Grace, and good to see you. I mean, you know a bit of the history of the club, obviously. The first thing is the capital raising. It's a big ask for a $25 million licence, so no doubt the people behind Canberra's bid are working behind the scenes to raise some of that capital, and I think they would probably have support from the APL as well for that. There's clearly issues around the playing venue, and if Canberra United is going to be playing at Canberra Stadium, then I think there are some upgrades that are needed there. I'd be a bit disappointed if the women's team was always going to be playing at Canberra Stadium when they've got such a fantastic boutique venue here at McKellar, where I am now. 1,500, 2,000 people in a stadium that takes 20,000 is not really a good look, but hopefully with a bigger stadium, then the crowd capacity might increase because of the additional seating and shade and amenities and everything else. There's a lot of talk too about training venues. The government and Capital Football have been working for some time on a new home of Capital Football and the teams in the A-League at Swansea. So that requires a little bit more funding injection. And I think the other big thing is two aspects. One is to get the full community behind it. And I heard a little bit about your discussion regarding Canberra. We have to keep in mind that this is going to be a team for Canberra and the region, which takes in the Snowy Mountains region to Cooma and beyond, out west to Wagga and places like Griffith, where there's a very large cohort of football supporters. The second thing is playing in summertime. We've got a fairly fickle community here that often disappears, particularly over the Christmas school holidays in January. They head down to the coast, and there's often been comments that if you want to get a good crowd for a Canberra United game, then maybe play it in Bateman's Bay, because that's where you'll find a lot of Canberra people. So there's a lot of issues that have to be gone through, but I don't think they're insurmountable.
Heather, I wanted to ask about Capital Football, because since 2017, when Canberra United last won a piece of silverware, they finished top of the league and won the Premier's Plate. We've seen Melbourne City come in. They have dragged Melbourne Victory with them in raising the standards. Sydney FC have matched. Western Sydney Wanderers are pursuing. And now we've seen Western United come in and set another standard again. And I feel as though, as the last Federation-run team, maybe Capital Football has not been fit for purpose to run Canberra United in the modern era. You were the trendsetters. You were the best team for the first decade, right up there with Sydney FC and the Brisbane Roar. I mean, is it actually a blessing that private enterprise and private ownership is now going to come in and relieve Capital Football of running Canberra United?
I don't think what Capital Football has put into Canberra United in the last few years has been as great as it could be, but I don't think there's been any demise. I think a range of other things around the W League, as I would still call it, have occurred, including CBA, APL and the unbundling. And yes, there's an increase in standards across the board, but there are many other clubs that are struggling because of the lack of support for their women's teams. I don't need to name them, you would know who they are. But I think the most important thing about a new licence coming to a men's team in the A-League, the sign just fell down on my head. The most important thing is that the improvement in all of the management of Canberra United continues as best as possible. We need to keep in mind that there's been a change in the management at Canberra United, Capital Football, since I left. They're up to their third CEO now in 6 years. So, some stability and some continuous improvement as well would help with the women's team. But the most important thing is that whatever governance or management structure the new franchise has, it has to make a big effort to continue to build the women's program. And when I look out here on the field, there are a lot of younger players in there that have come up through a very strong Canberra United Academy program. We've got a few interstaters, but the bulk of the team is still pretty much Canberra-based, led by stalwarts like Heyman and Brush and Laura Hughes and Grace Marr and Nikki Flannery. That's what makes Canberra so special, that loyalty and the consistency for the players coming back year after year. And we need to make sure that a new franchise acknowledges that and builds on it.
Heather, we can see how passionate you are about football in Canberra. Thank you so much for joining us on Dub Zone today.
No problem. It's been my pleasure.
You did very well to dodge that sign as well. Well done. We'll let you get back to football. Heather Reid joining us.
I got to go to the game. Thank you very much.
Get back out there. We'll get back out
Just a
there
big
as well and
big
find out
rush.
exactly what's happening at McKellar Park. Teo, Heather was mentioning there, I think at the end as well, about the fact that it is Ellie Brush's final game here at McKellar Park. A really special afternoon, but yet to trouble the scorer, the home side.
No, just to finish on this discussion, I've made the case. I'm clearly going at about 10% versus 90%. What I will say is, look at the ownership models in the NBA and the WNBA in the basketball. You can have the same owner running a men's and a women's team out of the same building with the same parent organisation, but you can have two different names, two different brands, two different colours. You know, Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Lynx. And if the men's element of this Canberra expansion wants their own name, wants their own colours, wants to do it differently, I still think the Canberra United women's brand can be protected, and I actually would roll with two different looking and named sides, but out of the one parent organisation. I don't know if it'll fly, but that's currently what I would opt for. Yeah.
I think it's definitely an interesting thought, and it will be fascinating to see what the investors decide to do, whether it is a case of kind of piggybacking off the success of the branding that the Canberra United women's team have, because as we've just heard, they've got a long history. They've created it from the ground up themselves, and they're the real trailblazers for this new men's team to come through. Or if the investors believe that they can have a standalone team that doesn't need to piggyback off the women's.
Just on the game, there's been one shot on target in 40 minutes. This game has been cagey. Some finals are free-flowing and hectic and desperate, as we saw off the top of Dub Zone today. Some, Grace, are real arm wrestles, and this one has had one shot on target combined, and a combined XG of 0.44 in 41 minutes of football.
So exciting stuff is what you're saying. But look, what I think we'll see is in a second half, it open up a lot more. It's a warm day in Canberra this afternoon. Players will start to fatigue. We'll see some changes, and so often we do see that in the second half of the game. Goals will start to come, and look, we'll start to find some spaces between the lines out there.
I mean, who does a draw? A draw is a better result for Victory than Canberra. So Canberra's the one that have got to make the running here. Not that Victory would sit back and play for a draw, but it's certainly a case, Grace, where Canberra are the ones that have to be the aggressors here. They've got Wu Cheng-Shu on the bench, has only scored the one goal this season, hasn't really had a signature moment in the competition so far. Other than that, Grace Taranto, Chloe Middleton, Kennedy Faulkner, the goal scorers in this team are out there on the pitch already. It is how they approach the game that is going to unlock this Victory defence.
Yeah, and I mentioned before as well, Vesna Milivojevic, I think she's been excellent for Canberra this season as well. Michelle Heyman, obviously coming into some good form, and we know that she's very much in the running for the Golden Boot, which is unsurprising with Michelle Heyman at the fray there. Nikki Flannery as well, she's had some really good moments. She's had probably some opportunities where she herself would put her hand up and say she knows she should have capitalised on those moments. But Canberra have been a team that have created so well all year and just haven't had always that final product. But they're rallying around today, and it does look like they've got a pretty decent crowd there at McKellar Park.
Approaching half-time in this one at McKellar Park. Let's head back across the ditch now to Sky Stadium, where Wellington Phoenix are up against Perth Glory. It's the visitors with the early first-half goal in this one, Tejo. But in terms of shots, in terms of possession, Nick's absolutely in this game.
Yeah, they are. Going at almost 60% Wellington, but they've only turned it into 5 total shots and 1 on target. And as far as final third entries, touches in the opposing penalty area, it's more or less level. It's just that Sierra Hinson, with that touch of class and the finish, is the difference between the two teams at the moment. But both these games have been quite cagey, obviously for different reasons. Perth need to win today.
I'm so sorry. I'm laughing because Neve called you Teo.
Sorry, Kat, no, I'm losing it over here.
Just for those who are watching, this is what happens on live
Minor
TV.
hiccup. No
If
one else
something's really
noticed.
funny.
You just have to go with it.
Sorry, Teo.
Are we live? Are we still live?
We're live.
And I think it's good. It's good for the viewers at home to know why all of a sudden Kat beside you is crying.
Because I'm crying over here.
At least there's one professional amongst us, Teo.
I'm ploughing on. So there's 2 minutes to go until halftime here. Look, to be fair, it hasn't been the greatest game either. And as far as Perth are concerned, Grace, I mean, the road to the finals for Perth is a little hazy in that what result they want between Victory and Canberra, because it's out of their hands and they start needing results in other games. They would obviously want Sydney to survive the Canberra appeal and keep the points. So Canberra would stay on 3 points fewer. Canberra can get to 30, Perth can get to 31. So they're not just chasing Victory, they are chasing Canberra as well. in theory, they could still catch Melbourne City. If they were to beat Melbourne City in Perth next week, and then Melbourne City was to lose to Canberra in the final round of the season, they'd be on 29, and then Perth could potentially overtake Melbourne City. But obviously, if City lose to Canberra, Canberra gets 3 more points. And so these are all the Tetris blocks that I'm trying to turn into clearing lines here, and we're in the right set for that.
So with that in front of you there, a draw today would probably be best for Perth, as in a draw between Victory and Canberra. Would you say?
It's tough because I don't know if they want Victory to get that extra point. I think what they want is Canberra to win today, but then...
That makes them harder in the chasing pack.
But then they can't beat City. Yeah, no, these are... Basically, if you don't take care of business yourself, you end up here at the end of the season. And, hey, if Perth had just beaten Adelaide last week, they wouldn't have this problem.
Well, that's the case. And look, this is so fun about this season in the A-League Women's, because so often the top 4 by now is known, and the fact that there's still so many possibilities around how this could turn. I think in the women's game particularly, this is such a good situation for us to be in as a neutral or as a diehard fan of a particular team. Having this chase, having this finals pack, having 5, 6 and 7 still be able to qualify for the top 4 is exactly what we want from a season.
And we do suspect that this will be the final year of a top 4, because next year with Mariners coming in, full home and away, 22-game season. But with 12 teams, we're also assuming it's going to be a top 6. And so I do wonder, if you walk away from this year finishing 5th or 6th, how disappointed would you be really, knowing that in a year's time, you'd actually... you'd get an elimination final and you'd still be an underdog. And we can't assume that the finals system will be exactly the same as the men's. But at this stage, I think it's great that we've got such a cliffhanger, 11 into 4, given that next year it's going to be 12 into 6.
Yeah, I think for this season, the reality is a top 4. So going throughout the whole year, all teams, all players would know that that's what the situation is. And there's no assumptions that it will be as the men's final top 6 is. So, for the girls going into this season, they'd be working towards that top 4. I don't think they'd be too, of course, disappointed to miss out on the top 4, but not in the sense of, next year this will be different.
Almost half-time at Sky Stadium, where the visitors lead 1-0. Let's head back to McKellar Park in Canberra, where we're approaching half-time in that game as well, and we've had a couple of chances late in the half.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been the liveliest game in an attacking sense, but Canberra are now up to 8 total shots, 3 on target. Vesna Milivojevic just over the frame of the goal there. Casey Dumont, if you recall, at CB Smith Reserve earlier in the season, had a heroic display as Melbourne Victory defeated Canberra, and Canberra just absolutely dominated general play, and Casey Dumont was making one-on-one saves. Canberra couldn't buy a goal that afternoon. And I guess the fact they haven't scored past her in 46.5 minutes again here, Grace, means that Casey Dumont's on a one-player mission to foil Canberra this campaign.
Look, I think that's been a fair summary of Casey Dumont's season. At times that she needs to, she comes up really big for Melbourne Victory. And in terms of shots on target, how are we tracking Teo for both Canberra and Melbourne? Have they each registered shots on target? Do you have those stats in front of you?
Canberra 8 shots, 3 on target, and an XG of 0.41. Victory just the 2 shots, 1 on target, 0.14. And as far as touches in the opposing penalty area, it's 8 each. So not a lot happening. It's a lot between the 2 penalty areas at the moment, rather than attacking goalmouth sort of play, as has been reflected by the lack of highlights we've had to show really from the game.
Well, you'd argue that it's the stuff between the 18-yard box that's maybe the easier part. It's either end of both attacking and defensive play where those fine margins really come into play. And it certainly sounds as though Canberra have had the better of the chances and just keeping Casey Dumont that little bit busier than what Chloe Lincoln is at the moment.
And it's interesting because I went to the game last Sunday against Western Sydney Wanderers, and watching it in person, it's always a different experience to watching online or watching on television. And certainly the impression I got from the game was that the Canberra were quite wasteful and should have, dominated the game and done a lot better. We'll stay with Beattie Goad here for Victory. Oh, that's clever from Beattie Goad, and she is a natural left footer. Oh, it's just across the face, and there is an exciting chance for Melbourne Victory. And Beattie Goad, the ball bent the wrong way, Grace. It didn't curve back. You thought that was heading for the top left corner, but instead it bent away.
We didn't quite get the shape around that cross that Beattie Goad would have liked, but this was really clever. She's got Hayley Taylor-Young, who is seriously rapid, has completely overcommitted to that challenge, and you can see what Beattie Goad was trying to do in terms of wrapping her foot around that ball, but didn't quite get the curve that she would have liked.
So, but yeah, I thought I came away from that game thinking Canberra had absolutely dominated the match and deserved to win, and I saw their XG was something like 1.16. So what I was seeing with my own eyes, as far as, sometimes if the offside flag goes up and it's a marginal call, that doesn't add to your XG, right? But it just felt as though Canberra didn't do enough to make the running. They played a back five for a lot of the game. They were dropping Grace Maher into centre back, but almost in a sweeper role at times. And against a very organised defensive team in Western Sydney Wanderers, as the halftime whistle goes, it felt as though they didn't take the game on early enough to win it. And they, last 5-10 minutes, they were kind of really going for it. But Wanderers had organised and had set in by that point. And those are the sort of things, I think even more so than the 5-0 loss to Western United or the 5-0 loss to Wellington. It's the game they could have picked up 2 extra points in. That's the one they'll regret as the missed opportunity.
Still plenty of time left for them to take their opportunities in this one. At McKellar Park, it is 0-0 at halftime between Canberra United and Melbourne Victory, while Perth Glory lead Wellington Phoenix 1-0 at Sky Stadium. Time for a very quick break here on Dub Zone. We have got our grassroots goal of the month to show you. Don't forget you can enter through the Keep Up website. $250 on the line thanks to Liberty. This week, is it Kat Haddad, the winner? Let's check it out. Grassroots goal of the month.
Ball's played forward to Shay Connors. Shay Connors got opportunity. She's got it!
What a goal. What an absolute finish. This is a beautiful left-footed strike.
A great shot from Shay Connors. She took it early. Hilary Beale was off her line. And she slotted it in, and she's been electric to start this half.
Hadn't kicked in until this morning, and I saw it on the socials, and you can probably hear in my voice. I'll start to get a bit emotional. It's I suppose it's been my life for almost 20 years, really, since the start of Canberra Eclipse, first of all, and then into Canberra United in 2008. Certainly, having a kid puts a different perspective on life, and your priorities immediately shift, and he's our life now, and that's where my priority is for sure. I had 2 years of bad knee injuries, and that could easily have been it, but I suppose that competitiveness and determination in me to want to try and get back to playing at the highest level, weighed heavily on me. So yeah, Mum and Dad have been the reason I've been able to do as much as I've taught me everything. Dad'll tell you, he taught me everything I know. And his health's not good. And so, I wanted to have this, I wanted to have this season back in front of him and Mum, and for Christy to allow us to come here and bring Leo. It's something really special. Life's bigger than sport, and it's kind of the moment that it's the things that you do it for, is the family, and so this is the way I sort of wanted to do it, is in front of Mum and Dad, and it's kind of feels right.
Ellie Brush announcing her retirement this week. 2 grand finals, 2 premierships, and special, I reckon, Gigi, to see a player of that calibre get to finish her football on her terms.
I think that's the most important part of that, is that she had 1 ACL injury, a 2nd ACL injury, and at that point, for so many players, that's your career done, that's your career over. But she rehabbed really well. She's a physio as well, so she knows what she's doing. Maybe do as I say, not as I do in terms of her recovery. But she's done so well to come back to Canberra, and I think to be back in front of her home crowd, family, friends, her partner, her parents, at a hopefully packed McKellar Park to what it looks to be, is a really special moment.
I'm a hopeless romantic. I would love to see Ellie Brush score at least one goal this afternoon and help Canberra to victory in her last home game, but we haven't seen a goal as yet, Teo.
We haven't. And, well, Ellie Brush would be a very viable scorer at a set piece. She is the highest scoring defender in the history of the A-League Women's. But this first half was one of precious few chances, that is for sure. As we see here, Melina Ayres turning and bearing down on goal, sliding across the face and not able to get a goal-bound touch. Melbourne victory late in the half. This was Leah Privatelli getting in behind and sending a crossover, but Chloe Lincoln sure-handed and able to grab the ball. Canberra, chances for them started to increase as the half went on. That was the best of them. Vesna Milivojevic flashing it over the top of Casey Dumont. Michelle Heyman is leading the Golden Boot at the moment. But that one, you need to be better than that to beat Casey Dumont in goal. And then right at the end of the half, Beattie Goad able to skin Hayley Taylor-Young, but the ball bent the wrong way off the boot and slid out for a goal kick. And so, Grace, it is 0-0 between those two teams. A result that certainly gives victory the upper hand in the race for the top four.
It does, and I think as well you mentioned in terms of the quality coming off the bench, Canberra United have a little bit more of a defensive bench there, whereas Melbourne victory, Alana Murphy's just returned from the Young Matildas, really talented midfielder. Maya Markovski, we've seen the impact she has when she comes on to games to try and change them for victory as well. And of course, Ava Breedis, another of Leah Blaney's under-20 Matildas that could make an impact. Canberra United, on the other hand, a little more defensively minded, looking at their bench five. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic that plays out in the next 45 minutes as well.
Our other game, Teo, happening at Sky Stadium across the ditch. It is the Knicks with more possession, equal number of shots to Perth Glory, but it's the visitors with the lead at the break.
Certainly, and even though it's been 60-40 possession, final third entries have more or less been dead level, and the goal for Sierra Hinson, really nice build-up play with Ella Mastrantonio and also Hannah Lowry. This is Sophia Sakalis earlier in the game, and you see here just a really incisive pass, beautiful communication. And again, when we talk about the season getting longer, often this would be the time, last game of the season, teams are finally putting it together. And, that's why some lower teams have a dead cat bounce and are able to pick up points. It's because they have got the cohesion together. So it's so exciting that this league has gone from 12 games in length to 18 in the space of 2 years, up to 22 by next season. Header over the bar there, Perth with the chance for 2-0. Look at that, really clever from Sophia Sakala. She's got all the tricks and the skills and the flicks, and Hannah Lowry, unfortunately, not able to make the most of that. Wellington, chances have been precious little. We know they're perhaps a more dangerous team at set pieces than in open play, with the only exception really being the game in Canberra. Look at the body language there from Grace Wisniewski. Frustration you could see there that the pass wasn't coming back to her, because she is a long shot specialist. Paige Satchel, lots of speed, and ultimately not the touch from Emma Ralston. It just hasn't been her season coming back to the Liberty A-League for the first time in about 6 years. And then that shot to end the half. Disappointment for the Phoenix as they keep knocking on the door in their battle to avoid the wooden spoon.
Well, I think Sakalis has been a player you mentioned in that's been really good for Perth as well. But again, just looking to some of the benches, Alana Janchevsky I've found has been excellent coming off the bench for Perth Glory. And as much as I'd like to see her get a little bit more game time, I can understand why Alex Apakis has kept her on the bench as one of those impact players too. But for Wellington, Ava Pritchard, Alyssa Wynnum on the bench to come on, those kind of players and the excitement, the energy they bring, I'm expecting two pretty big second halves of football in both the matches we've got this afternoon.
Yeah, those are good options. And Millie Clegg on the bench as well. I think they've got real attacking weapons there for Gemma Lawrence to turn to.
Last night we saw Adelaide take on Newcastle. You called this game, Teo, and Adelaide needed 3 points out of them, didn't they? To keep your mathematical brain whizzing throughout the final rounds of the season, they needed the win, and they didn't quite get it.
And it was the first time back at Coopers Stadium in more than a year for Adelaide. They were 2-0 down, but you see here halftime sub Amelia Murray able to set up Katie Bowler for the goal that made it 2-1, and then she was able to get the goal herself for a 2-2 draw. Now, why are we highlighting these? Amelia Murray is the captain of the young Matilda. She's only 18 years old and only recently turned 18 as well. She's got pace. She's got real smarts. She's one of these wingers that reminds me a lot of Hayley Razzo. Not quite Holly McNamara, in terms of her movement, but she's got the straight line speed and she's got a good football brain. The thing I really like about her, Grace, is there's no pressure to rush her into the national team anytime soon. She's allowed to develop. She's allowed to grow in the A-League Women's. The competition is getting longer. She has the skill set to be a Matilda, but there's no pressure. I mean, we talk about someone like McNamara, get her in now, because really, I think she's in our best 23. Same with some of the other players that I've thrown up there, flying kites to try and see if anyone's listening out there. But with someone like Amelia Murray, I think there are players in this demographic like a Hannah Lowry as well at Perth. It's a slow burn, and we can see the evolution of these players in the league. But the reason I wanted to ask you about Murray is, what does she need to add to her game? Because I've got some thoughts, but I don't want to bias your opinions here. As we track the development of a player like this, what do you want to see her keep adding to her game as she grows from great prospect, captain of the young Matildas, into a plausible senior Matilda?
Yeah, look, I really like what we're seeing from Amelia Murray. She's an excellent young player. As you've mentioned, all of those qualities I agree with. I think she is potentially a real future of the young Matildas and the Matildas set up in terms of program. I think at a young Matildas level, she's got leadership and how she leads that side, and again has just come back from Kyrgyzstan with Leah Blaney's under-20s team. So I think bringing that experience back into Adelaide United, and as years go on, whether she stays at Adelaide or looks to move around into another A-League women's club, I think it's those kind of experiences domestically that will grow her into what could be a potential future Matilda, because I think she's got the qualities that she could then step up into that national team program, and I'm happy she's not been rushed as well. I think that's great.
In terms of what to look for, like she was dynamite off the bench yesterday in a game where Adelaide really needed it, because Fiona Wirtz started pretty well in the first 15, 20 minutes, but then they were struggling for cut-through against a well-organised Newcastle defence that actually got a 2-0 lead through pressing quite effectively against the Adelaide team at the other end of the pitch. But finishing and decision-making in the final third were the two things that Murray hadn't been displaying this year. She'd scored just the one goal so far. This was number 2. It's only her second career goal. But we've seen this with a player like Courtney Vine. I think Courtney Vine took 21 games to score her first A-League women's goal, and then they started to come gradually, and now it's, you know, a far better strike rate. And we've got a senior Matilda who's spent her entire career bouncing between NPL and A-League women's without needing to rush overseas. And she's 24, turning 25, and entering the prime years of her career. And so it's that finishing, it's that final touch, it's that sort of sense of where the goal is. You can't purely be zoomies and worrying only about out-sprinting your opponent down the wing. It's that game sense which I'm seeing the building blocks of. And last night, I really did think I'm seeing a future Matilda before my eyes with the impact that she made in that game.
Look, and I'd argue that any young player, finishing and decision-making are things that come with time. And it's very, very rare that a young, unrefined, raw player just has those things sorted really early on in their career. Over time, over years in the league, over years internationally, it's the experience. Decision-making then just becomes second nature, as does finishing.
And it shouldn't, the intangibles, you know, who she is shouldn't matter. But you mentioned she's a captain, she's got leadership. She's an Indigenous Australian, really proud of her heritage. She's the kit model for Adelaide and is incredibly commercial. Amelia Murray as someone that you could put on a poster and say, this is the future of what football looks like in this country. But it's also an Indigenous athlete, which is fantastic. It's a potentially great story as long as the football is equally great.
Well, I think the thing about Amelia Murray as well is she's so well-spoken, and she's obviously got a really good head on her shoulders. So irrespective of anything else, the fact that she's a level-headed young woman in the game is something to be celebrated. The fact that she's a wonderful footballer, Indigenous Australian, is just a bonus on all of that.
We've put a poll out there this afternoon, Kat, about Canberra United. They're introducing an A-League men's team into the competition next season, and we have asked whether or not that A-League men's side should have the same strip and the same name as the Canberra United women's side we're seeing in action this afternoon. Step us through how the poll's going and indeed how Teo's going in this one this afternoon, Kat.
Well, it looks like Teo's made a bunch of accounts and voted no, but it wasn't quite enough to beat
How
the
many
19...
burner accounts do you have, Teo?
If I used a burner, I can assure you that you wouldn't call it sports washing, you'd call it Teo washing. I can proudly say that I do not have a burner, nor do I advocate for the use of them.
Clearly you don't, because you're getting hammered this afternoon, my friend.
That's true, actually. The 9.3 is clearly, it shows that you do not have burner accounts. But 90.7% of the Liberty A-League followers who have voted would love to see this Canberra United or this Canberra men's team adopt what we see from the Canberra United women's, the kit, the colours, the lime green. You've even worn green today, Teo, to support them. I think I'd love to see it as well.
Can I just say that if the investors that are going to be spending an 8-figure sum of money on investing in football in Canberra want to have a chat, I'm available, and I'm a pretty economic consultant in terms of how much I'll bill them for my 9.3% popularity thoughts.
So are you going to lay out a nice strategy on how...
I've got some ideas on what to call the team, but I'll probably, let's just keep those patent
I'm
pending
not
for
sure
now.
any of them are publishable, Teo.
Maybe keep the names to yourself, but what's a colour that you think that the A-League men's is missing?
Yeah, if you're going away from Green Machine, which has worked very well for both the Raiders and Canberra United for a number of years.
One of the reasons I'm so romantic about the National Second Division is that Australia does need a team that plays in black and white stripes. And when I see a team like Brunswick Juventus in there.
Mm.
It's such a powerful brand, whether it's Newcastle, whether it's Juventus, whether it's Notts County. I do think that's the colour scheme the league would love to have.
Well, a new colour scheme in the Liberty A-League this year is sported by Western United, and Hilary Beale's been good enough to join us on Dub Zone this afternoon. Hilary, you're coming off 2 Player of the Month wins in a row. Talk to us about your form to begin with, and what's changed, do you think, that has seen you take your game to another level this year?
I came down here to get some minutes. Obviously was excited when I got the opportunity to play for Western. I think training in the NWSL always helps. But I guess training with players there and then coming down here, and we have a good team. And I think it's just been a year of hard work, and it's been great to be able to show it.
Last time your side lost 2 games in a row, you absolutely roared back into form with 3 wins on the trot. How much confidence does that give you that you can turn this latest little dip in form around?
It's never good to lose, but I think we're excited. I think it's a motivation. So I'm confident with this group going into the end of the season and what's ahead of us.
Hilary, thanks so much for joining us. And look, I'm curious, coming down to Australia, has the level been that of what you've expected it to be? Has it exceeded your expectations? Where has that sort of plateaued in your mind?
We might have...
Hilary, we might have just lost you there. I don't know. Hopefully you're back in the room.
Sorry.
Go for
Can you
it.
hear me now? I think, it's definitely a different level. It's a different style of play. I think in the U.S. it's a little bit more direct, but I think it suits me well, and I've enjoyed my time down here. It's a different style, but I think it suits my game.
Hilary, in terms of what the old W League or the A-League Women's has done for American keepers, so many have come out here. Did you look at the path that a Britt Eckerstrom or an Aubrey Bledsoe had followed in coming to Australia for these minutes? Was there someone who recommended the league to you, or was it a case of, because Australia already had such great ties into the NWSL, the first contact you made was when Western United actually reached out to you?
Actually, Alex Chidiak helped me get down here, but no, I always knew girls came down here to get time and kind of prove themselves, get experience. I've seen it with Aubrey Bledsoe. Jill Lloyden's always been my mentor, and I talked to her before I came down here. She spoke very highly of her experience, and then obviously having Jess down here was a cherry on top for a bit. But no, everybody I've spoken to is raved about it, so I was happy to come down here.
Interesting that you mention Chids, because obviously she's gone back to racing Louisville now, as have a number of players on NWSL contracts. And back when the league was a lot shorter, it used to be the case that Abby Dahl-Kemper, Sophia Huerta, Danny Colaprico, they could come out here, they could play for 3 months, and then they could go back to the NWSL. It's really different now, and obviously it's a coup that Western United have been able to keep you for the rest of the season. But how do you assess that relationship between America and Australia going into the future so that there can remain strong ties? But obviously, in your instance, you get to stay here and actually play the finals and the business end of the season. I'm sure you'd probably love to be going back to the NWSL as a number 1 goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think it's crucial for me to get these next few, these few games in the championship and things. Those are things you don't always get the opportunity to play in, and I think as a young goalkeeper to have it this young and that experience, I think it's good. Obviously, buzzing to go back to the NWSL and try and prove myself, but I think it's been good. I think it's crucial to be down here during this period of time. Luckily, we've put ourselves in a good position to try and win it all, so I'm happy to be down here for that reason.
What's the long-term ambition? Is it to be an NWSL number 1, or would you be open to Europe? I mean, what is actually the pathway that you're hoping to live out with your career? Because based on what we've seen from you in Australia, I think the sky's the limit. I mean, don't sell yourself short.
Oh, thanks. I've been away from home for quite some time now between college and just now here. I want to eventually be back in home being a number 1 in the NWSL. And obviously, if I have to go to Europe to get there, I'm open to anything. But wherever the game takes me, I'm happy to go.
Hilary, to hit you with all of the hard-hitting questions, what I want to know is what's some of your favourite things about Australia? It's a new place to live for you. Obviously, Chidiac sold the country to you enough for you to want to come out here. But what do you love about it? What's different, and what would you miss when you're no longer here?
The coffee is phenomenal. It's not very common that you can go to any cafe and get a nice latte or a strong coffee, but that and the food and the people are very, very friendly here. So it's been great. I will miss the coffee though a lot.
Hillary, thank you so much for joining us on Dub Zone this afternoon. Best of luck in the run into the finals.
Thank you.
Hillary Beale, Western United goalkeeper, joining us. And you said in that chat, Teo, the sky's the limit. And we know you don't pump up people's tyres for no reason. She has had a phenomenal season.
But that's the history of this league. It's the fabric of this league. And you would have played with and against players, Grace, in that era when the season was only 10 or 12 games, where the best of the best were out here in Australia. Not just Megan Rapinoe, Christy Mewis, I believe, was your teammate for in Canberra for a couple of games. I mentioned Colaprico, Dale Kemper, players that went on to the US women's national team, World Cup winners in the case of Dale Kemper. I mean, this league has a proud history of, doing good things for the US women's football program.
Yeah, Jess Fishlock, Kim Little, some of the world's best players have played in our competition, which I think is a real credit. And it was at the period of time where there was 3 or 4 international spots, and they were so highly sought after. To get a spot from whether you were from America or from Europe and establish yourself in Australia. And for a lot of those women, it was then about going and finding their way in either their national team or their domestic competitions, which we've seen. You mentioned there, Abby Dalkamper played at Adelaide United, which at the time was a bottom table type of team. She did so well and then went back to America, played really well there, and is now a mainstay, with the exception of injury, in her national team. And same thing with Christy Mewis, played for Canberra United and is now in the US women's national team and most likely to attend a World Cup with the US women's national team. So when we've got that kind of platform to support not only our local girls, our domestic girls, but also those internationals who are superstars in their own right. That's a pretty impressive platform to have.
I remember watching Megan Rapinoe out here playing in the W League as it was then, and it's just mind-blowing.
It is,
players of that quality and also that stature in the world game playing here on Aussie soil. Remarkable to see. Let's have a quick check of the scores around the grounds, because we've got second half football underway in both of our fixtures on Dub Zone this afternoon. At McKellar Park, it remains scoreless between Canberra United and Melbourne Victory, and Perth Glory holding on to their first half lead at Sky Stadium. It is still 1-0 up over the Knicks. Might head back to the nation's capital though now, Canberra up against Melbourne Victory, because Teo, as far as finals football goes, this a hugely important contest.
It is, and Victory have just done a lot of absorbing in this second half. Canberra have had the territory, Victory have had possession. They're almost defending with the ball at the moment. No shots of any description in the first 8 minutes of the second half, and there is Jessica Nash, former Canberra United player, who's standing at right back for Victory today. We need to put, as these games remain a slow boil, hopefully getting up to the temperature that we had for the early game between Melbourne City and Sydney FC by the end of the game. I think this little lull gives us an opportunity to get back to discussing what happened with the Brisbane Roar last week. Now, if you missed it off the top of the show, Ishonori accumulated 4 yellow cards, the fourth of which was Brisbane's 1-1 draw away to the Wellington Phoenix. However, took the field as a suspended player last week against Western United. It was a 2-0 win for Brisbane, which has since been overturned to be a 3-0 forfeit to Western United. And the Roar have 7 days to appeal. We're yet to hear if they are going to be actioning that appeal. As far as seeing this in football, it happens in state leagues, it happens in NPLs. I used to work at a state federation. It happened all the time, 3 or 4 times a year, and it would always be hotly debated. But the rules are the rules, and you can't really dodge them. I guess what a lot of the runctions on social media were yesterday is, how did this happen? It does seem as though it's an audit at every level of the competition, whether it's the administrators, whether it's the independent arbiters, the FA who give us the referees, who alert about the suspensions, whether it's the clubs themselves being diligent to these things. I mean, even us. It was a Dub Zone game last week. I mean, if you're going to count cards, go play blackjack. I didn't know that Ishonori was on 4 yellows going into the game, but it totally slipped by me. Grace, it's not a great look for the league, and we can't really dodge it, but it is also a learning moment for a lot of people. I'm not saying anyone's head needs to roll. I'm just saying that we can't really afford for this to happen again.
Well, I can pretty much assure that the stats around card counts will be the most visited page across this last 24, 48 hours. Because you're right, the question of how did it happen, we don't know. We don't know how, whether it's a club or the league or anyone involved in this situation missed that. But the reality is that it has happened. And the black and white of that situation is that if you field an ineligible player, then that's what the sanction is. So it's tough for Brisbane. Shay Connors, she scored 2 that day. She's been in good form. Obviously now she still gets the 2.
I believe,
still
yes,
gets the 2.
Keeps the goals.
Yeah, but the result
is, and the goal difference is also vital, because Western improved their goal difference by 5 as a result of that turnaround. So
it's really tough for Brisbane, but as you say, they are sort of the rules, and the black and white of the situation is that is what the sanction. And I don't think there's too much grey in that area.
I think it's an element of, we're all trying to grow the game, and fans keep clubs to account. They keep the HQ and the administration to account. They vote with their remotes and with their clicks with regards to the media. And I feel as though this is one of those moments where, everyone's got to put their hand up and say, we'll improve, we'll get better.
Yeah, and it has to be a learning situation. I think everyone has to sort of acknowledge it. And from here on in, look, I think pretty safe to say there won't be any of these exact situations cards missed for the remainder of the season.
It throws such a curveball into the ladder with a couple of weeks to go. I look at the ladder now, and perhaps the punishment for Brisbane Roar, if they are found to have breached that rule, and it seems to be pretty clear, that's straightforward. It's the 3 points and Western United get them. But for Canberra United as well, I look at the ladder now, and with Western United and Sydney FC both at the moment holding an extra 3 points because of these sanctions that we have seen imposed by the governing body. For Canberra United and Brisbane Roar, who have had those 3 points taken away, it feels like, Teo, we could have a 6-point turnaround really quickly in the lead up to the finals if we see either appeal successful.
Yeah, and I mean, not to tell old war stories, but I mean, when I was working in Shepparton, we had a grand final where a player who'd been subbed off then took a penalty in the penalty shootout. And
how does that happen?
A grand final, a championship for a 6-month season of hard work was decided in a tribunal. And as much as, the result wasn't overturned. So the team that won it on the pitch got to keep the title, albeit with a player they'd subbed off taking the penalty. And I don't know, I feel as though in my media career, I've always remembered and noticed these incidents, but there's nothing more heart-wrenching than the hard work of the players going out and playing and then finding out that the points that they won on the pitch are being taken off them.
How hard is it then for the players themselves coming into the final? So Canberra United, for example, who went on that remarkable run through February, and it's one of those games in Feb that has now been called into question. How hard is it to keep your head in the game when you thought you'd broken your way into the top 4 and all of a sudden that's being revisited?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Look, I think for the players, it's one of those things that you do have to talk about, you have to process, and yes, like I mentioned earlier, control the controllables, but you have to address it within the playing group, privately, within 4 walls, because if you don't, it can fester. So you have to talk about it and then look to how you can move forward as a playing group. And then that's going back out onto the pitch, out onto the park. There is only so much players can do in this situation. And if you let that completely dissemble your season, when you still have an opportunity to make finals, to make top 4, then it becomes really about mentality more than anything else.
And is that when the likes of Michelle Heyman, of Ellie Brush, who we've spoken a lot about today, those real leaders within a side, come to the fore?
For sure. And it's those big game players, those experienced heads, those motivational people who lift the group. And if that sort of crumbles away, then it's really hard to, I guess, re-establish momentum in a team. Like, we see teams with momentum just find ways to win, create their own luck. And when your momentum is really suddenly halted and beyond your own control, it can be quite damaging. But I think when you've got players like those experienced brains around you, you can turn things back around.
We'll see whether those players can stand up for Canberra United in this one today at McKellar Park. Both sides yet to trouble the scorer in Canberra. Let's head back across to Sky Stadium and check in there, Teo. Last we saw, Perth Glory were up 1-0 over the Knicks. Has it changed?
It hasn't, and Wellington haven't turned to the bench yet. Grace was speaking about how they have all these attacking weapons on the bench, but arguably their best one, as we see this save from Sarah Langman, is the set-piece taking of Michaela Foster, I should say. This player has been phenomenal, Grace. Left foot, right foot, taking corner after corner here, and Sarah Langman, who is not the tallest goalkeeper, able to make some saves and try to command the area in the scrambles as best as possible. Certainly a case where Foster has really got the A-League women's to thank for becoming a New Zealand bolter for their Women's World Cup squad for her dead ball delivery alone. I mean, she's one of the revelations of the season, and if she was Australian, we'd be raving about her, to be honest.
Well, left-footed, I'm really enjoying watching Foster grow in this league, and whether it be her corners, her set pieces, her delivery, she's just gotten better and better week in, week out. And there is starting to be a little bit of noise around the New Zealand national team, and rightly so, because she's a player who's putting her hand up and saying, well, this is what I'm capable of, and perhaps was never given the opportunity before. It's
been one-way traffic in the second half. You can see there we've already played, 17 minutes of action. Perth, no shots, only 10 entries into the final third. Wellington, 4 shots, 2 on target. They are creating all the momentum at the moment. 7 touches in the opponent's penalty area to 0. So Perth Glory haven't even touched the ball inside the Wellington Phoenix penalty box in 17 second half minutes, as we see Paige Satchell getting forward again. Reality is, Grace, that with the exception of last week where they got the job done against Sydney FC, this has been the story of Wellington's season. Good patches, periods of dominance, but not the goals to capitalise on when they've got the momentum going in their favour. If Perth weather the storm here and go on to win this with a clean sheet, this is really a carbon copy of what Wellington have teased their fans with all season.
I think that's where Wellington have struggled, is to maintain dominance across 90 minutes. And as you mentioned there, they've had little patches, little periods across games, or moments, individual moments. But what they're yet to completely knit together across a whole performance is a full half or a full 20, 30 minutes of that completely dominant football where you look at a team as a serious contender.
6 corners to 0 in this game as well. Perth haven't had a single corner. Really, as we see the cross in, we were just talking about Foster, but that is deflected out for a goal kick. So they continue to attack in vain at the moment.
I won't be calling this one, though, until we actually hear that final whistle, because I had Sydney FC taking all 3 points out of their clash with Melbourne City. I'd given it to them. If I was doing the table, it would have already been there. And in the final moments, it completely changed, Gigi.
Yeah, and I guess they are moments. Football is made up of a series of moments, and a team that capitalises on those moments is going to be the team that comes away with the result. This afternoon, that's been Perth, but from the looks of things in this second half, they're sitting in, with the exception of this passage of play, much more defensively and probably dropping numbers back a bit, absorbing more, and Wellington have looked the more likely and perhaps the more lively. But look, I think we'll see some changes very soon in this game, particularly just to spring it back into life.
Gigi, you made the point of momentum, and I feel like stoppage time is where you can sometimes see some of that momentum. We saw it in the earlier fixture between Sydney FC and Melbourne City. Anything can happen. These moments, like you said, are so important. But I wanted to go back just a moment to the Brisbane conversation, because there was a question from Tim on Twitter just saying, does Norrie still have to serve that 1-game suspension on top of this?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Brisbane are playing Western Sydney Wanderers tomorrow. You would assume that the suspension's being served tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will be tough for Brisbane. So with Norrie out, with Katrina Gorry out, their midfield really tough in the middle of the park there not to have those 2 players available.
So we see Michaela Robertson getting some treatment there on the field. We've got the Liberty A-League Premiership Trophy here with us today, the Premier's Plate. And Gigi, you're on a trophy tour of your own this week with the World Cup Trophy. Tell us a little bit about your adventures and where it took you.
Well, it was pretty remarkable, and it was just this time last week that I got back, and I was fortunate enough to travel to China with Football Australia as part of the FIFA Women's World Cup Trophy Tour. And this is a pretty spectacular event. These guys travel the Women's World Cup all around the world, stopping off in different nations, putting on different events, and I was really fortunate to be part of this event, which across 4 days in Beijing and Shanghai was completely mind-blowing. And there is the Women's World Cup in all of its glory.
I'm admiring you in team tracksuit.
Oh, thank you, yes.
Isn't that that's an exciting thing, isn't it? To be back in team colours, get the team tracksuit back
I just
on?
loved that I was in trackies. I was like, this is great.
Nice and comfortable.
But it was a really wonderful trip, and a complete whirlwind. I was on for 4.5 days, but a really great experience.
Grace, no one's talking about China at the moment, even though they did win the Asian Cup in pretty thrilling fashion. We saw Zhao Yuyi, who scored the match-winning goal in the Asian Cup final, come out here to Australia and misfire, didn't score a goal, didn't settle in with the Adelaide team. What are the Chinese saying about their national team, given that Australia, if they win the group, even if they finish second in the group and there's upsets on the other side of the draw, could very plausibly end up with China in a round of 16 game or a quarterfinal?
Well, I can tell you, being over there, they are extremely excited about the World Cup. The fact that China did win the Asian Cup last year they're still buzzing off that high. So that's incredible. I was also really fortunate to meet Sun Wen, who's a champion of the Chinese women's national team, 1999, player of the tournament there, and she was just an absolute legend. And she spoke about the excitement in the nation and what their youth development pathway is doing to support players, and they're a phenomenal setup. So I think they'll be really good.
They were a powerhouse of women's football in the 90s, and they've faded in more recent times, and the Asian Cup maybe is a revival, and they might be about to shock the world at this World Cup and, you know, beat European opposition and find their way to a deep run in the tournament, potentially at Australia's expense. But they've been off the radar for a while. Did Sun Wen talk about why China faded and why they needed to reinvest and go again in order to try to, you know, get back to their top seat at the table, which they previously held?
Yeah, she didn't speak specifically about that, but what we did get a presentation on was the Chinese youth development pathway across the country and some of the geographical challenges that they have, similar to Australia, given that we are such a large country. But just the investment that they have in their youth development pathways is amazing. And I think that we're going to see a little bit of that in the World Cup, but also in many, many years to come, similar to what we're doing here in Australia in the way of our youth development pathways. And I think we won't necessarily see the fruits of that for some years, and similar to China, but they're going to be contenders at the World Cup. You can never rule out the Chinese women's national team because there's some seriously quality players in that side.
The only other thing I wanted to ask about is why didn't Zhao Yuyi work out? You know, Wu Chengshu is still playing for Canberra United, another player with Chinese international experience, scored just the one goal this year and has regularly been dropped out of the starting 11. And we know the language barrier is probably the number one and the most obvious reason, but I mean, regardless of your trip to China, why is it that Zhao Yuyi just did not work out for Adelaide United?
Look, it's a great question. It could be in part the language barrier. I think something that we need to remember about the way that the Chinese women's national team and their youth development is managed is that they play such a consistent formula way across their teams, so that when you take them out of that system, they're suddenly experiencing different players, different styles of football, different environments that they may have genuinely never been exposed to before unless they've had other international experience. So whether Zhao Yuyi has played over in Europe or in other nations that aren't Asian nations, then the experience in coming to Australia could be a completely different style of football that she's actually never had exposure to before. And I think that was probably where some of the difficulty was.
Do you experience that as a player and with international players coming into your side and having those conversations with them, that it can be a real period of adjustment to the playing styles as well as the playing conditions, which playing through the summer over here can be very different to what international players are used to?
Yeah, completely. And look, I think I'd liken it to when so many of our Australian players go either to Europe or to non-English speaking countries, and we hear of the troubles that they have. And the same thing applies when international players come to Australia, whether it's the heat playing in the depths of an Australian summer, whether it's the language barrier, the food, and just those acclimatisation things that we have similarly going over to other parts of the world. The same applies with them here. And myself doing that in the Czech Republic, I found that really, really difficult and a big struggle for me personally. So I can understand how players who have not played in this heat, this environment, this culture before would have similar kind of problems.
What were some of those challenges that you found? Because we had Ish Ferguson on the couch last week, and she said when she first played for Millwall, she ran out and realised that her studs, her boots had actually iced over.
Yep.
What were some of the challenges that you found?
Language for sure. So the place I was living in, Czechia, was south of the country where they didn't speak much English at all. So that was the biggest and starkest challenge for me going over there. And when you learn a little bit of the language, you can kind of get by, and football is somewhat a universal language. You can speak football, but the basic things of going to the shops and trying to order something to eat and understanding how they do things in different parts of the world, definitely the biggest challenges. And as well, the environment. It was freezing cold when I went over, so I know what Isha's talking about when she refers to her boots icing over, because they're these things that in the Australian summer of the at the time, the W League that I was playing in, I'd never had my boots ice over before.
No, they're not an issue.
They actually melt.
Your studs melt. Quite the contrary.
Last one on China then.
Yes.
They start with Denmark in Perth. Then they play Haiti at Hindmarsh Stadium in Adelaide. And then they finish with England, also at Hindmarsh Stadium in Adelaide. Where do you think they're going to finish in that group, Grace? Do you think they get the better of Denmark? Could they shock England and potentially top the group? I mean,
working backwards, obviously England is going to be the biggest challenge in that group. Haiti, perhaps a surprise entrance, we would say, into the World Cup. So you'd think that China should beat Haiti, and then Denmark is one of those really unknown entities. And I think that game could go either way. And if China are to beat Denmark, then it will come down to that last group game against England.
Hey, just one other World Cup question I wanted to ask while we're on it. During the week, there was a rumour that Thierry Henry had been attached to the vacant French women's national team job since Corinne Diacre got fired. The week before it had been the Chad Hervé Renard, and I was so excited about that. I was given the trophy if Hervé Renard is the French manager. I mean, he's won the African Cup of Nations with Zambia, Cote d'Ivoire, and we saw what he did with Saudi Arabia at the Men's World Cup. Do you think France can get the appointment right? They're a plausible Australia opponent in a potential quarter-final, maybe a semi-final if we get that far. But what direction do you think France will go, given that even though Diac's gone, the resentment and actually getting the players on strike back onto the field hasn't happened yet, and the new appointment is probably going to be key. So Wendy Renard, Amandine Henry, Marie-Antoinette Katoto, Kaditi Diani, sorry, I've butchered that, Diani, they're not back yet. They haven't backflipped. It's not like it's over. So how important is that appointment? And do you like the idea of Thierry Henry or Hervé Renard?
Look, I think you probably answered your own question in that appointment could not be more important. That appointment needs to be a figure that brings together those players you've just mentioned and gives them everything in the right platform to thrive. And we know the quality of those players is unbelievable. They play in some of the best leagues in the world. They're legends of the game, and we want to see them here in Australia and New Zealand playing in the Women's World Cup. So I'm not too fussed individually as to who that person is, as long as they can collectively bring together these champions of the women's game, and we see them here in 120 odd days in Perth for their game, in Adelaide, wherever it is that they're playing across the country. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but we just need to see those players in country playing in the World Cup.
France play Jamaica in Sydney, Brazil in Brisbane, and then they finish with Panama in Sydney. And then, they could be plausibly, if Australia win the group, they could be plausibly waiting in a quarterfinal.
Teo is an Arsenal fan, so I think he loves the idea of seeing Thierry Henry.
I think so too.
No, I hate the idea. I don't think Thierry Henry should be anywhere near the French women's national team. If I was making the appointment, I'd be going to Saudi Arabia. I'd be saying, can we please loan Hervé Renard from you? You can have him back for Men's World Cup qualifying or the Asian Cup. We just borrow him for 6 months, win the Women's World Cup, pizzle the USA 10-0 in the final, and then he's yours. He's yours forever after.
How you really feel, Teo.
It's so simple. It really is so simple.
We have a goal. We have a goal to break up this chat, and Canberra's finals hopes have been revived because they have broken through here against Melbourne Victory, and with less than 20 minutes to go, all of a sudden the dynamic in the finals race changes. Casey Dumont is reading the riot act to her defence, but Grace, it's Canberra 1, Melbourne Victory 0.
What a huge moment for Canberra, and we saw just moments ago Casey Dumont absolutely writhing at her team. And it looked almost for a moment like Ellie Brush, but in fact Kennedy Faulkner, who's tapped that one home into the back of the net. But that will go down as an Ellie Brush assist in her last game here at McKellar Park. But what a huge moment for Canberra United.
I mean, it's a scrappy goal, but Kennedy Faulkner, who's definitely had her struggles in defence this season as a centre-back, had a horrendous scare against Melbourne City earlier in the season where it looked for all money like she'd torn her ACL, and then thankfully it was just a jarred knee. It's a great moment for her.
And a centre-half combination as well, combining for the goal. You saw what that one meant to Ellie Brush.
I mean, we said earlier at half-time that a set-piece, a corner, might be their only hope. And, hey, who was it? Ellie Brush on the end of a corner kick that set up the goal.
Oh, that's huge. What a special moment as well. And look, there's a few minutes yet to play, and we know Melbourne Victory, they're a quality side, and they'll look to respond really quickly. But for Canberra, what a moment.
How conscious are you as a player, especially in a game as hard-fought and tense and tough as this one has been, of those moments after a goal is scored?
Yeah, it's something that I spoke about a lot with my local NPL team, and something that I actually borrowed from former Canberra United coach Jitka Klimkova, the Big Five. So the Big 5 minutes when you kick off, the Big 5 minutes after you score a goal, when you concede a goal, how important those moments are to stay really tight, defensively sound, really smart and switched on, because so often you see teams score or concede a goal and then in the 5 minutes after the converse happens. So they're the most important moments in a match, and for Canberra now, this is a huge 5-minute patch.
Well, you spoke about keeping that concentration. Melina Reyes has been legged, but the referee says it was all ball. Huge tackle inside the penalty area, and that was hard-in-mouth stuff in Canberra after this hard-fought lead that took them 70 minutes to get in front. They nearly gave it back within seconds.
And the crowd at McKellar Park, I tell you what, after that, we'll start hearing them more and more. They'll really come alive from that. They're they're always a really, really vocal crowd, and I know that Teresa Polias has sat in this chair before, and she knows how hard it is going to Canberra, and for any visiting team, the crowd is right on top of you there. The grandstand just veers down right onto the field, and you hear every single word spoken, and sometimes as well through the effects mics too.
Here's Nikki Flannery. Canberra would love a second. They'd love a safety net here. Grace Charley with a volley. But instead of looking for a teammate, just knocks it down to Casey Dumont, who was able to hold onto the ball. And goals change games, Grace. And we said this one was a very slow boil. It is finally starting to simmer this game.
Well, hopefully this sort of brings energy into the game, both from Canberra and from Melbourne Victory, because it has been a little bit of an arm wrestle, a cagey affair in the middle of the field. And for this game to come alive for the last 15 minutes, look, that would be quite a way to finish off this one.
Oh, and that flashes across the face as well. And all of a sudden, we're seeing phase after phase of attack. And perhaps Casey Dumont was right to pull the defence in and give them a talking to. Grace, I think this drinks break is going to be quite poorly timed as far as Canberra are concerned, because they've got all the momentum at the moment. But this is Grace Maher here, who was, of course, the subject of A-League's All Access just over a week ago, flashing that cross through the penalty area.
Casey Dumont looked furious when that goal went in, whether it was a defensive breakdown or we saw the goal, but yeah, she looked angry with whatever had come from that.
Kennedy Faulkner started on the bench today and had only been on the pitch for 2 minutes when she scored that goal. So Negoš Popovic, it's an inspired substitution right there.
And not the most attacking substitution either, but obviously a good target for set pieces. And a huge moment for Kennedy Faulkner. That's special for her to come on and score a goal.
And we see here Faulkner with the slide challenge initially. Ayres got through that, and then look at that crunch. I think that is Ellie Brush, who's come in right at the last. No, it was Hayley Taylor-Young charging in there, the youngster, who was actually named as part of the Future Matildas program as a scholarship holder for that program during the week, as we get another look at the goal. But it doesn't matter how they go in, Grace. It may not have been the most aesthetically pleasing goal, but they willed it over the line. That's all that matters.
Look, it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be in the back of the net.
I've seen a few players diving into the goal today, haven't we?
Yeah, hitting the back of the net.
Hitting the back of the net. Yeah.
So Victory have turned to the bench. They've subbed off Leah Privatelli and Catherine Zimmerman. There's another close-up look at that Hayley Taylor-Young slide challenge. And they've brought on two youngsters, Alana Murphy and Ava Breedis here. So Jeff Hopkins had a pretty young bench because he's got Maya Markovsky and also Rosie Curtis, who is quite unlucky. She's been an unused sub 3 or 4 times in the league and has yet to make her actual debut taking to the field. But a very inexperienced bench, Grace, and Jeff Hopkins is throwing the kids in the deep end and saying, go and get us an equaliser.
Yeah, well, Jeff Hopkins, we know he's a super experienced coach and he has a lot of trust in his younger players, and that's why we've seen so many good young players come through Melbourne Victory. And look, I know Alana Murphy and Ava Breedis, they've got quality behind them, so I'm sure they'll look to impact this last 15 minutes.
And as far as what this does to the table, sorry, Kat, Canberra would move up to 24 points, of course, with an asterisk, potentially up to 27 if they were to win the appeal. Victory are on 26. So it's 2 points the gap between the two of them at the moment. And just to recap their run home as well after today, Canberra finished with away to Western United and away to Melbourne City. So they've got 2 away games in Melbourne. Melbourne Victory have Brisbane Roar at home, and then they finish on the final Saturday of the season with a 10 a.m. Eastern kickoff against the Wellington Phoenix.
I was going to ask earlier, apologies Terry for interrupting you. You mentioned that there are players who do sit on the bench week in, week out. We don't often talk about the ones who don't get that run around. They don't make it onto the pitch. To have that happen consecutive weeks in a row, what's the mentality of a player at this point in the season when they've not had a minute to play yet? Do they see it coming this season, or are they sitting there kind of just thinking that it's unlikely it's going to happen at this point?
Look, I'm really glad you've brought this up, Pat, because it's a point that is probably really important to me as a former player as well. I spent time with Canberra United being a starter. I spent time being a player who came off the bench, and I spent time as a player who spent a lot of time in the stands. So I know the experience of each of those different roles, and I can tell you for the girls who are either on the bench getting very few minutes,
or near miss, ball deflects wide,
or in the stands, how difficult that is, because you're there for your team and you're there to support your teammates and the club and the squad, but it's heartbreaking because you want to be playing, and to get told every week that you're either in the stands or that you're on the bench and then you don't see the field, or you might see the field for 1 or 2 minutes, it's a really, really difficult role to play. So I'm very conscious of the players across the league, not just Canberra United, not just Melbourne Victory, what we're watching here, but across the league, who have that very difficult role to play.
perfect timing. Melbourne Victory made a double sub while we were chatting. And onto the pitch comes the number 27, Rosie Curtis, for her A-League Women's debut. 18 years old. Congratulations to the Eltham Redbacks, one of their juniors, making a debut in the A-League Women's. And again, Jeff Hopkins, we said he's already thrown on 16-year-old Ava Breedis, 17-year-old Alana Murphy. On comes 18-year-old Rosie Curtis to try and grab an equaliser for Melbourne Victory.
It's a huge moment, and again just speaks to the confidence that Jeff Hopkins has in his young players to say that, yep, I believe in you in this big game where we're chasing the game and need to impact this last 10 minutes, that he's got confidence in Rosie Curtis to do that job.
Would you say it's also a benefit of having an extended season, is that players who in the past may not have had a run around, we're now at the point where that depth is so necessary in order to maintain momentum for a longer season, that more players will get a chance to make it onto the pitch?
Yeah, I think so. And whether that's due to injury or unavailability and just the length of the season, player load management, we have seen teams really dig deep into their benches, and we've seen squad depth become more and more important than it ever has been before, I'd say.
When do you usually find out as a player? In the week leading up to a game, and I know it differs depending on who the coach is and their approach, but when are you usually finding out whether or not you've made that starting side, whether you're on the bench or whether you're going to be watching from the stands?
Yeah, well, your point is exactly
Canberra
right.
Canberra in. Oh, great save, Casey Dumont. And that would have been 2, and Canberra looking good for all 3 points with 10 minutes to go. And it's Wu Cheng Shu who had the chance.
We saw that one build in, and a good save from Casey Dumont. Again, good position in, but Canberra just starting to build in. And it's a lovely little one-touch play from Michelle Heyman, and Wu Cheng Shu perhaps needed to do a little bit better with that shot, look to put it on the ground. That's a really comfortable height for Dumont to make that save.
And now at the other end, Melbourne Victory trying to break, but the ball's a little straight down to the keeper.
But to your question, Evo, you're right. It depends exactly on the coach and the manager and when they want to share that information. Generally, as a player, you know. Throughout the week, there's teams that are set up in formations and you can see, okay, that's the starting team and this is not the starting team. So you tend to have an idea. But in terms of the actual confirmation, some coaches will speak to players the day before. So you've got match day -1 training, and you'll not only set up in the formation, but then afterwards they'll announce the squad. Other coaches I've heard sometimes announce it on the day at the game. So different ways of approaching player readiness, I guess routine before a game day, and it's really tough. It's part of the game that I don't miss, and one of those things that in lead up, in preparation, in mental resilience, it was a really difficult part of the game.
Yeah, emotionally a tough thing that you're dealing with each and every week of the football season. As we head back across the ditch now to Sky Stadium in New Zealand, we've got Wellington Phoenix up against Perth Glory. Teo, Perth holding on to their lead and what would be a hugely important 3 points for them.
Yeah, and Wellington Phoenix, there's been a second half full of frustration for them because they have controlled the territory. They have dominated the possession, 58% possession for the Wellington Phoenix. You don't see that in too many games. As far as specific to the second half, they have had 19 touches in the opposition penalty area. Perth have had 1. They have had 1 touch in the opposition penalty area in 40 minutes of play. They have dropped anchor here, the Glory, and tried to hold on to this 1-0 advantage that they've held from early on in the game when Sierra Hinson gave the Glory a 10th minute lead. Wellington have had 21 shots, 6 on target. Perth have had 8 shots, just the 3 on target. And it's been one-way traffic without the cutting edge. And this would absolutely demoralise Nat Lawrence. I said Gemma Lawrence earlier. Nat Lawrence, the Wellington Phoenix coach. 26 crosses to 5. So it's been cross spam all game, and they just haven't had someone to head the ball in or get a touch and bundle it over the line. 8 corners to 3. And Claudia Chico, the Australian, has been subbed on here for the Wellington Phoenix as they just look for something a little bit different to try and get an equaliser in this game.
That's a real source of frustration there for Nat Lawrence because that's a completely dominant half, and those stats that you've just rattled off, Phoenix need to find a pathway to goal that's going to create and find the back of the net. But at the moment, creating that many chances and not being able to get more shots on target and just challenging the goalkeeper a little more than what they're able to do at the moment.
Case in point, that shot from Ava Pritchard there without a great deal of juice behind it. I mean, Grace, you would have played in games where, if the opposition touches the ball in their penalty area once in 40 minutes, it's probably because the game is 6-7, 8-0. But at this level, for this level of lopsidedness, I mean, if nothing else, it tells the story of Glory's resilience.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to whether that was an instruction at halftime from Alex Epakis to, really batten down the hatches, sit in, absorb a lot of pressure and try and play on the counter. Perhaps it was. But look, he's a really attacking-minded football coach, so I'd be a little surprised if he said, look, let's settle it in and just absorb for this next 45 minutes.
Not just that, to have nothing going on the counter-attack as well. You'd think that if you're absorbing, you can release players with long balls and try to hit on the counter, but we see Millie Clegg here getting in behind for the Phoenix. This might be the moment. Alyssa Wynnum is there, and now the shot from Hassett. Oh, it's bobbling in the 6-yard box, and no one can get a goal-bound touch. Keeper was out of the equation, but Glory are able to scramble it away.
I almost kicked the table just then.
Oh, and Alyssa Wynnum was one of the players in that pile-up, and she's been clattered as a result of all the bodies that were flying in this sea of legs, Grace.
Yeah, there's just so much traffic in and around that 6-yard box there. You can see Perth captain Tash Rigby has absolutely collected Wynnum there, and accidentally too. There's sort of no malice about that, but just the fact that Phoenix, and this probably summarises their afternoon, they have not been able to get a really clean shot away on target, but this is not a good sign for Alyssa Wynnum, who has been substituted on in this second half for Phoenix, because she does look to be in a little bit of discomfort.
It's really hard to actually work out what the injury is because really Tash Rigby fell on top of her in the penalty area. So hopefully the distress there is not reflective of a serious injury.
Well, she's getting some treatment there. We might head back to Canberra, to the nation's capital. It is the home side with a 1-0 lead and almost an assist for the goalkeeper, Teo.
So ball over the top here, bouncing on for Grace Jarley. And Jarley advancing into the area. Just high and wide. And that is a great chance for Canberra to make it 2. Hey, this is starting to become a rerun of what we had earlier today, where Sydney FC had all of those chances to lead 2-0 and didn't take them, as Ellie Brush comes off to a standing ovation from the home fans.
Oh, what a special moment that is. And I'm sure that's quite emotional for Ellie Brush. A nice sentiment to have her substituted off so she can take that time to acknowledge the crowd and conversely be acknowledged by the crowd.
So it's Chloe Middleton who has come on for Canberra United. As we see a high ball in, Casey Dumont able to grab it out of the sky. As we know, Melbourne Victory won the Melbourne Derby against City on Monday, and they have turned to the kids to try and grab an equaliser here. The fresh legs off the bench, hoping that they can perhaps get the draw that would still leave them in the box seat for finals. And, well, that hearing, that tribunal to determine the outcome of the game between Canberra and Sydney, the stakes are raised because now Melbourne Victory will be very interested onlookers. They've got a stake in it, quite simply, if this result holds and Canberra are able to win 1-0.
Well, that would have been the question. Had Canberra fallen to victory today, and should this result stand, then it would have come down completely to the appeal. But now if this result does stand and they can get the 3 points, then more important becomes that outcome of the appeal that they've put in. And look, I know that Nagosh Popovic and the group will be waiting on bated breath if that is the case.
Maya Markovsky with the cross in here, and it's a victory equaliser. And it's Tiff Eliadis, just like last season. Melbourne Victory made the top 4, thanks in part to a Tiff Eliadis equalising goal against Canberra United late in the season. And she has popped up and done it again. Tiff Eliadis loves scoring goals in Canberra, Grace, and this could be a hammer blow to Canberra's top 4 hopes.
Oh, well, Eliadis is so reliable for Melbourne Victory, and this is just a sign of Jeff Hopkins, his trust that he has in his players. You've got to say it's a little defensively poor. Tiff Eliadis, you can see, just running centre of screen, has been able to float in, just nips in front of Grace Maher, and is able to get that touch ahead of Maher at the centre-back position there. It's a really neat goal, but Canberra will be frustrated with how easily that was created.
Well, you have to wonder, unless Ellie Brush was absolutely exhausted, why they subbed her off. Tiff Eliadis is her 2nd goal of the season. It's just her 4th goal in 59 A-League women's appearances. 27 years old now, Eliadis, one of the senior heads in the team. She's been there, she's done it, she's been a star in grand finals. She can play any position on the pitch. That's what... it's the reason that she's stayed in this league for such a long time. She debuted as a 16-year-old. She's been in this competition for a very long time. And gee, she pops up at important moments and uses that seniority to great effect.
She does, and she's such a utility. I think I really admire Tiff Eliadis because she does at times need to bide her time. She's not necessarily a starter week in, week out, but when she's called upon from Jeff Hopkins, she does a job. And that's been in the back line, it's been in the midfield. And as we've seen this season, it's been up front as well. And look, when you've got a player who is willing to do that work for a team, step into any role that's asked of them and score goals in big moments, that's so important.
This game is coming to life. Canberra, as we see the cutback here, are trying to win it again. Ball is cleared from the edge of the 6-yard box. It's going to be a desperate finish. Hey, we did end up getting a replica of what happened earlier today with the Melbourne City versus Sydney FC game.
And as well, we mentioned the draw. That might suit Perth better, perhaps, maybe, just. It's a bit of a cagey one, but I think ultimately either Canberra or Victory are searching for those full 3 points.
Can tell you the Perth game in Wellington has gone into stoppage time. Alyssa Wynnum was able to walk off under her own steam, but right now Sierra Hinson is down, getting a cramp stretched out as Perth look to waste time and wind down the clock to what could be a 1-0 win for them. Canberra, desperate to go back in front here, cross into the box, is going to slide on for a corner kick. And as we know, they scored from a corner earlier, but Ellie Brush isn't out there to aim for now.
I was about to say, if Ellie Brush was on the field, she would be rubbing her hands together for this one.
And 5 additional minutes of stoppage. That is the live ladder as it stands. As we see, the corner goes to waste and is fired out. So Melbourne Victory would be 5 points ahead of Canberra United as things stand. Canberra could close back to within 2 if they were to get the appeal go their way with the Sydney FC result. But crucially, Melbourne Victory would control their destiny. And, well, you can't afford to waste a corner kick like that, Grace, when you're running out of time.
No, it's those moments. You need to make the most of those opportunities. Delivery needs to be on point. Got to get good numbers into the box. And you can just see the intensity, the speed at which Canberra are starting to move. And I don't know, maybe Jeff Hopkins will be comfortable with the 1 point, but certainly for Canberra, this is a 3 points or otherwise today.
Well, and now Jeff Hopkins is in a situation where his young players aren't chasing the game in a carefree manner. Now they have to be defensively disciplined, and the tables really turn. Wu Cheng Shu playing it to Sasha Grove at the edge of the box. Looks like another free kick's been given, so it's a set piece, and Grace Maher will use that left foot to try and put it on a teammate's head.
Well, important for Canberra now to set up really carefully here, get good numbers into the box, take their time on this set piece. They do have moments to get good bodies in around the 18-yard box. And look, we know with the delivery of Gracie Maher that she's got such great technique on that left foot, and she'll be looking to send a good, dangerous ball into that dangerous area.
So right at the edge of the area there. Glad we got another look at that foul, because it did look like a light to non-foul, I might suggest.
A little soft.
Yeah,
say it.
But Canberra won't care. The home fans, maybe that's a long day of the referee having the home fans in their ear. So let's see this free kick. Vesna Milivojevic is the right-footed option. Grace Maher is going to take it left-footed instead. It's an outswinger, and Markovski heads it away. Here's Wu Cheng Shu steering it to Nikki Flannery. Look at Victory. They've packed the penalty area here. There's no gaps. And now the counter-attack is on. Great defending from the front by Ava Breedis, but it was short-lived. Canberra get the ball back. Grace Maher sends it into the box. Kennedy Faulkner has stayed forward here. The defender has 1 goal already today. The ball is awkward, bobbling, and it's cleared, and Victory have now seen off 2 of the 5 additional minutes.
And this is going to be the part of the game where Victory will be tested in terms of their gamesmanship, how they can manage out this next couple of minutes. Certainly get the sense they're not chasing the 3 points. They're looking to manage. They've got young players out there, and Canberra are peppering the 18-yard box.
Now the touch on, is it offside or onside? Oh, it's off the inside of the post, and no one can tap it in. That is extraordinary. How did that stay out?
Oh my goodness.
I cannot believe it. It looked offside initially, but the flag stayed down, the shot came in, and it hit the inside of the post. Now Canberra, former champion here, heart rate, Grace, we need to put the monitor on you because this is a tense finish. Wu Cheng Shu puts it in. Dumont leading out fists first and was fouled and is down. And Nikki Flannery was there. It's body on the line stuff. I'm going to need a physicist to explain how the ball didn't end up in the back of the net there. What on earth happened?
Look, I couldn't actually tell you until we see it here on this replay. It looked like it hit 2 posts inside. So the inside post, there's the inside other post, and bounced out.
Oh, well.
Wowie.
That at the end of this game, if Canberra don't win, they need to take those goals out and donate them to charity and never let them stay at McKellar Park ever again because they're cursed. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Hopefully Casey Dumont is okay here as well. She's getting treatment there just off her goal line tail. We know she's had some injury issues, some concussion issues this year, so hopefully she is okay.
Yeah, and when she came back, I think she was playing in the headband initially, Casey Dumont, but it seems to have, she was playing in the cap last week and has moved on from that. But you look at how they're assessing Casey Dumont here. I mean, these are, neck and spinal issues that are being assessed here, not just concussions. So, she's responsive. Hopefully the medical team are doing this purely as a precaution. But here's the incident. Leaping out, head first, fists first, and into Nikki Flannery, and nothing Flannery could do about that. The goalkeeper's made the ball her objective here, Casey Dumont, and with no regard to her own safety. We can tell you that it's full-time in Wellington, and Perth have closed out a 1-0 win that very much keeps their finals hopes alive, albeit with a very difficult run home and a pile-up of games in hand.
Well, that's a very resilient performance there by Perth to hold on to that result and to really sit back in and absorb what was a lot of pressure after an 11th minute goal from Sierra Hinson. But look, you really hope Casey Dumont is okay here. She's such a brave goalkeeper when she comes out to look to collect those kind of challenges. And both her and Nikki Flannery just eyes for the ball on this challenge, but have absolutely cleaned each other up.
Now, I know not to mention the war, but I'm just looking at substitution windows here. Victory made a 55th minute sub. They made a double change at the 79th minute, and then they made a 66th minute change. So they can't bring on Miranda Templeman. Dare I suggest...
Is it going to be Markovski?
Is it going to be Markovski, who spent stoppage time in goals in a game in Adelaide last season, putting on the goalkeeper kit again, and Victory will have to finish this game with an outfielder in goal.
She popped over to the sideline just then,
that.
Maya Markovski, for a little word with the coach. We saw her with the assist as well, Teo, for that all-important goal for Melbourne Victory, only moments after she'd come onto the field, and she's managed to do that a number of times this year for Victory.
And look, it's great for Maya Markovski because she had hip surgery that basically ruled her out for the first month and ended her NPL season early, and they're tricky injuries. I mean, Madison Haley right now is out with a hip concern. So it's part of the body that if you can't get it right, it can cause you pain. You might have to play in pain. Surgery might be the only option in order to ease your pain. But the good news is that is a big thumbs up from Casey Dumont,
and
which
a
means
smile.
she'll continue in the game. But now everyone's guessing as to how many additional minutes the referee's going to add on here.
Is it different when it's a concussion sub, if she were to be taken off due to concussion,
Well,
Teo?
I think we're about to have a tribunal to work out exactly.
Right.
I said don't mention the war, Grace.
Okay, right. Hold that thought.
So this could be anything now. We could have 2 or 3 more minutes, purely at the discretion of the referee after this stoppage. Canberra have hit both posts with one shot from Michelle Heyman. And now they're going to go and attack straight away. Kennedy Faulkner has been thrown up front, and Casey Dumont called back into action, and that is the sort of pass that she will be happy to deal with. And once again, Melbourne Victory in a big game and in a big situation, Grace. They just have the answers, don't they?
They do. And how many times have they been in this sort of finals type series football before, and they just come up with a solution, whether that's due to their experience, a couple of individual moments of skill, of brilliance, but they are so well versed in high pressure situations and finals football.
Are they going to take it, if they get possession, will they take it to the corner and just play for a 1-1 draw?
Well, perhaps for a little bit of preservation in the way of bodies and not wanting to put Casey Dumont under any pressure and having to make any saves after she's taken that knock, they may look just to wind the clock down.
So we're into the 98th minute. We've already had one very late equaliser today. Are we going to get an even later winner at McKellar Park? Wu Cheng Shu, slide challenge, keeps the ball away from it. Jessica Nash still reaching deep into the reserves to get to the finish line here for Melbourne Victory to keep the upper hand in the top 4 race. This is good play down the wing from Jale. There's a whole lineup of Victory players inside the penalty box, though. And Canberra, they can't get any penetration. They are being repelled by Melbourne Victory. That'll take us into the 99th minute of action. Keeping an eye on the referee, doesn't appear to be looking at the watch. And, well, you don't do that. You can't go backwards. You're just begging the referee to blow the full-time whistle. Canberra have got to get the ball up the pitch here. And so we see the pass tumbling on. Wu Cheng Shu flicks it on. Kennedy Faulkner's there, but Casey Dumont out to the edge of the box and is able to grasp onto the ball again. It's just going to go for distance here, Dumont. Sends it high. And now it's volleyed back into the attacking half, but Canberra can't put a foot on the ball. And the whistle goes. And for the second time today, it is a draw as good as a win. It was the case for Melbourne City earlier today. And it is the case for Melbourne victory here. Maya Markovski off the bench gets the assist. Tiff Eliadis, for the second season in a row, scores away to Canberra with what could be the decisive goal in the top 4 race.
And you can see just the body language of players there. For Melbourne victory, that will feel like a win. And for Canberra United, on the other hand, you see some of the girls crouching down. That will feel like they've lost those 3 points there.
We saw it earlier today when Melbourne City fought back to draw 1-1 with Sydney FC. And in that post-game interview, we heard Melbourne City describe it as a win. It's interesting, isn't it, depending on where those table standings are and indeed what stage of the game the goal comes, it can feel oh so different for the two teams involved in a draw.
I think so, and I think for Canberra being so close to that 90-minute mark and feeling like they've just gotten over the line. Ellie Brush had just been substituted off. She's got a nice applause at McKellar Park, and just for that to fall just short, the girls in green would have been bitterly disappointing.
As we have a look at the ladder after those results, it's Western United remaining on top. Sydney FC a draw with Melbourne City a little bit earlier this afternoon, and Melbourne victory and Canberra United 4v5 splitting the points at McKellar Park. Perth Glory staying in the hunt, keeping their finals hopes alive. They took all 3 points in a victory over Wellington Phoenix a little bit earlier on. Right, we'll cross to both of those games and hear from both camps in just a moment's time. But first, Hensley Handcuff from the Brisbane Roar has been good enough to join us on Dub Zone this afternoon. Brisbane play tomorrow. Hensley, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can I ask you about the news that broke overnight to begin with? A tough one for the Roar to stomach in that push for the finals. How is the squad feeling today?
Yeah, it's definitely gutting, kind of coming back from that game and hearing the news. You know, we weren't told really from the league that what was happening, that she
Hensley, I'm so sorry. We've just lost you there. We've lost the line for a moment. We'll try to get you back so that we can cross back and hear your thoughts in just a moment's time. So disappointing because Hensley good enough to come on the show and join us after what would have been a really turbulent week for the whole team.
Tough to talk about as well, and look, I really value that she is going to talk to us about it too, and I'm sure there's only so much she can say about the situation, especially once we sort of figure out what's going on. But I will be really curious to hear as to how the group is feeling, how the group responds, and look, the conversations they've had about it over the last 24 hours.
Hard losing Katrina Gorry this week as well, a real leader within the side, both on the pitch, but I imagine with her voice as well, because they'll really need those leaders in tomorrow's game.
I think so, and I think a real settling presence, and like you mentioned, not only just what she does on the pitch in the way of her touches and her contribution to the game, but what she actually does to the group and what she provides in a settler off the pitch, her experience, her leadership to that group. I think at this point in time, it would be so good to have her there. So look, I'm sure the girls are rallying around each other and the other leaders in the team are stepping up and doing everything they can do. But look, it's a really tough situation for them to be in.
Hensley is back with us. Hensley, I'm so sorry about that. We just lost the line. You were telling us how the group is feeling after a really tough week.
Yeah, kind of like I said, it was hard to come off of that after probably what was one of our best games of the season. But all we can do is focus on this next one and really make sure that we get the win just in case we do get the appeal. And off the field, we're doing all that we can to really get that. And, you know, I think it's even more motivating for us, even though it is a hard feeling with Ish being out and, you know, now Katrina and Kaisa being back with their club back in Sweden. I think I'm super excited to get some of the young girls out so they can show what they can do and really prove that no matter who comes off the bench, we're still going to be as strong as we are.
And Hensley, sorry, we did lose you during your first answer. When did the players find out? How were you told?
Yeah, we were told from our coach yesterday afternoon that it happened. So whenever we found out, again, like I said, we were all gutted and really frustrated that we didn't find out from like the FA or the league. We didn't get notified at all. And that's really hard because last year when this happened, we were notified. So you know, it is what it is, and we just keep doing what we can do, and that's all we can do.
Your own personal form has been magnificent. Win, lose or draw, you've had a lot of questions asked of you this season. How have you found the experience of playing in Australia, and as far as getting what you want out of being here, you know, regardless of the actual team's results? Tell us about your own personal form.
It's been wonderful. I came down here as a rookie back in the NWSL to get some games and get some playing time, and that's what I've got, plus so much more. Playing with these girls down in Australia has been just such an opportunity for me to learn so much more about football around the world and make connections with, people that I'm going to have in my life for the rest of my life. And that's kind of what football's all about to me. So it's been a wonderful experience. I've had some crazy stories that I can tell from here in Australia. But I have missed home a bit, but it's been such a cool experience I'll never forget.
Hensley, we're really enjoying having you here in the league. Can you tell us a little bit about what's next for you? What does the next 6 to 12 months look like in your career and what you're hoping to achieve?
Okay, yeah. So after our season here, I'm going to head back to the NWSL. I'm signed with Gotham FC through the next year, and I really want to push for getting into that 2 spot as I'm getting a little bit older, and then in the next couple of years, pushing for that number 1 spot. There could be more opportunities for me to play overseas, which I'm totally open to, totally excited for. Getting called into the U23 camp was super motivating to me because that kind of showed me that I can push to be like on US national team rosters. So, the next 6 months, next 12 months, I'm really focused on taking what I've learned from this season and trying to get better at it and then applying it once I get more playing time somewhere.
Hensley, it's fascinating to hear yourself describe yourself as a rookie in the US under-23 team. As you would have now come to Australia and experienced, 23 is a veteran in our competition because it skews so young and so many of the players are teenagers. What's it been like to come out of the college system, out of the the pro system in the US where the age bands are a lot narrower, and come into an environment where you're playing alongside high school kids and playing against high school kids, and regardless of how good they are, that our competition is still so young in terms of the demographic of players that play here?
Yeah, I think the system here of how players kind of are raised and trained from a early on is so different from the US. I mean, you're in high school, you play for club teams, and then you get recruited to go to college. And then from there, you kind of make your decision on where you want to play pro, if you can play pro. So it's just so different seeing the system here and how that has kind of brought up a lot of the girls and the focus that the clubs do have on young talent, which is super inspiring. And I think it's just going to get even better. And it's something that the US could probably take from it as well. Being in college is such a great experience. I talk about it way too much. There's just so many memories that you make on the field, off the field, through tournaments. And that was such a fun time in my life. And then being drafted to Gotham. And, when I first got there, I was 21. And Michelle Bedos was in her 30s. Mish and Ash was in her 30s, Ashlyn Harris. So I just felt like a kid again, coming from college. And then now being here at 23, I am, I guess, would say somewhere in that middle age range because we are playing with young girls, but it's still, the level definitely hasn't dropped as much as people would think because the girls are young. I mean, they're still so good.
Hensley, from your perspective, was Australia always part of the plan, and or how do Americans look at the Australian system, and is it part of the plan for you guys in terms of development, and is it on the map as somewhere that you would like to go as you're making your way through your careers, as somewhere that can take you places?
Yeah. Initially, whenever I got drafted, I had no idea. I knew that I was probably going to have to go overseas at some point, but I did not think it was going to be Australia. I mean, when I was told that I had this opportunity, it took me a long time to process because it's so far away and it's a great opportunity, but it's a massive commitment to move this far away from the United States and be gone for so long, be so independent, which I have been used to, but it's just a big decision. And one thing that my club Gotham told me is me going is going to create more opportunities for players to go with the connections that I'm going to make here, which is really inspiring, knowing that me being here may inspire other players to go overseas, go to Australia, play, where they have opportunities. So I think in the future, it's definitely going to grow even more. And I mean, this year we've had so many American goalkeepers, come over with Jordan Bloomer and Hillary Beale, which has been awesome to kind of have that GK Union, Rookie Union from the NWSL all coming over and having that friendly competition and holding each other at a high standard.
Have you guys been in touch at all as American goalkeepers here in the A-League Women's? Have you talked about it throughout the season?
Yeah, we have. We catch up a lot. Before Bloomer left, we were able to get dinner after we played them a couple of months ago and catch up and just hear about each other's experience. And all of our experiences have been different, but kind of have the same themes. And it's just been really cool, like knowing we're all in Australia, all working hard for our career and being competitive, not only with each other, but within our teams, but at the same time supporting each other and wanting each other to do well. Because at the end of the day, we know being a goalkeeper is such a lonely position and we're in it together. So it's been awesome to be able to be down here with them and have someone who can understand and relate.
We've loved watching you in action for the Raw this season. Thank you so much for joining us on Dub Zone and good luck against the Wanderers tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Great to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Hensley Handcuff joining us on Dub Zone. Brisbane Raw goalkeeper. They're up against the Wanderers at Wanderers Football Park tomorrow. 7 p.m. kickoff, I think, Teo. Is that
Correct.
right? Tomorrow
Yes.
evening?
Evening kickoff.
Pushed back.
Yep.
Which is good news. Let's dive into Dub Zone now before we have a look at the highlights. Stoppage time on Dub Zone, in fact. And our first question, Gigi, for you to begin with. When the dust settles, who claims that their Premier's plate this season?
Look, I think Sydney are going to nip it and they're going to leapfrog Western United and they're going to claim their Premier's plate.
Teo?
Yeah, I don't like Western's form. I think Sydney does it.
All right. If Victory claim 4th spot, are they favourites for a three-peat?
Yes, I think they're very good. Coming from 4th position, as we saw last season, they did exactly that. And we're seeing the kind of form, their resilience that they're able to claw back from really difficult situations. I think they could do the three-peat.
As Jesse Pinkman said, he can't keep getting away with it. Jen Hopkins, he's going to do it again. And the only way he will do it is if I say, nah, no chance. They can't go to the well again. Not even possible.
Question 3. Contenders or pretenders, Gigi? Have Melbourne City righted the ship?
Yes, I think they have. I think they've got some players coming back in, as we spoke to Naomi Chittimer earlier, and I think they've got good enough squad depth to see their finals run.
This is stoppage time, and gee whiz, they were good in stoppage time.
They were, but I actually don't think they've fixed the problems that caused them to collapse against Sydney last year and then in the prelim final against Melbourne Victory. I think they're going to head for a disappointing repeat of what we saw last season.
All right. Who gets the dreaded wooden spoon? Is it Newcastle or is it Wellington?
Well, this, in my mind, is going to be determined between that exact fixture. Wellington playing Newcastle next week. In that game, whoever wins that won't get the wooden spoon.
I'm going to call that fence sitting.
It is fence sitting. Yeah, I'm on the fence.
I think that even if Wellington lose to Newcastle, they might get Melbourne Victory with a rested, weakened squad in the last round, not wanting to fly their key players across the ditch because they're already locked into the finals. So I think Wellington might have just a little potential easy kill in a dead rubber for Victory in the last round to bail them out. I think they will avoid the spoon.
As of right now, Gigi, who is your Julie Dolan medalist? You're
Time's
not
up.
saved by the bell.
Time's up.
You're not saved by the bell,
Gotta-
my friend.
gotta
There's
go.
time. There's time.
Oh, man, there's been so many good players. The two names that have come to mind are Hannah Keane and Beattie Goad. At the moment, I'm going to edge it and say Beattie Goad.
Teo.
Last year, I thought Melissa Barbieri was going to win it, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only person that voted for her when the votes were tallied up, so I'm not even close. Michelle Heyman-Clear.
Love it. All right, that was stoppage time for today on Dub Zone. Let's head back to McKellar Park now and enjoy some highlights from what finished 1-1 between Canberra United and Melbourne Victory. It was a slow burn, Teo, but an exciting end to the game.
It really was worth the squeeze in the end because this game became thrilling by the finish. Melbourne Victory had the better of the first half in dispatches. They were really only half chances. By the end of this game, Grace, Canberra took 22 shots, 9 on target, 2.61 XG, and bar being beaten once at an absolute scramble of a set piece, Casey Dumont was yet again the scourge of Canberra United. Melbourne Victory, 7 shots, 4 on target, 0.96 XG, but crucially, the equalising goal. And this is Kennedy Faulkner bundling it in for the opener. However, Melbourne Victory were level soon after Maya Markovski finding Tiff Eliadis for the equaliser. And then incredibly, Canberra hit both posts in their search for a match-winning goal.
Well, this was such an arm wrestle of a match, and I think just listening to those statistics that you spoke about, Melbourne Victory didn't create much, but when they did, obviously they were able to capitalise. Canberra, on the other hand, Casey Dumont just standing up time and time again. It's been the tale of her season this year and seasons gone by as well. She's been exceptional. Canberra will be frustrated. That will feel like 3 points dropped. And for Melbourne Victory, that's a huge come from behind claim of 1 point, which is really important to their title race.
And on a hot afternoon in Canberra as well, they left it late, the victory, but they snagged an all-important point out of that 4v5 contest. Perth Glory beat Wellington Phoenix, who did everything but score at Sky Stadium. And tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. kickoff at Wanderers Football Park. The Western Sydney Wanderers take on Brisbane Roar. Let's go back to Sky Stadium now, Teo, because Perth Glory scored early and they were happy to sit back and defend that lead.
Oh, these numbers will make such frustrating reading. The Phoenix coaching staff won't enjoy doing the review because they've been here before this season, but this is the most amplified version of their frustrations. 24 shots, 7 on target, 40 touches in the opposition penalty box to 8, XG 1.46 to 0.31. Perth win 1-0. They got properly FM'd in this game here. The Wellington Phoenix, they made all the going and they end up losing 1-0.
Well, it's super frustrating for Wellington. I think, when you've got a group like this, you do have to try and look at the positives and what they were creating. The frustrating part will be not being able to execute in the final third. And like you say, that's sort of been an amplified version of their season, which is really, really frustrating for Nat Lawrence.
And that wraps Dub Zone for this afternoon. Grace Gill, always good to see you, particularly on a day that was a very big one at McKellar Park for Ellie Brush and her family, and indeed the Canberra United family.
No, it wasn't. A huge congratulations to Ellie Brush and what has been a wonderful career.
It sure has. Kat, her dad, thanks for your company.
Thank you for having me.
Teho, thanks for a great afternoon.
2 Dub Zones to go. See you next week.
See you next week. Thank you so much for joining us at home as well. Enjoy the football. There's more to come tomorrow afternoon in the Liberty A-League, and we'll see you next week for more Dub Zone and more football. See you soon.